That's right. Here we go. It is Hump Day. That Wednesday show. Yeah, I'm late. I know. I got jammed up over at Vaughn's chatting and lost track of time. And then when I got here, I started putting it in order, and then the damn thing wanted an update, so I had to take another couple of minutes. Dry socks and chicken dinner, hell yeah. That's the shit. That's what's happening right now. Hey, Phoebe. Welcome back, lady.
If I bought you a mansion.
If I bought you a mansion. What's up, Loretta? Welcome back. Good to see you.
All at a one-room shack.
Florida Explorer. Good to see you. Our southern contingent.
You would paint it black.
Oh, you are most welcome, Loretta.
You find your pleasure in feeling the pain. Not a cloud in the sky.
Alrighty. Well, looks like everybody's here.
You can still find a way to make it rain.
You can still find a way to make it rain. That's right. All right, here we go. Thank you, Aaron. All right. Well, as usual, we will be starting off with Dan Bongino.
Get ready to hear the truth about America on a show that's not immune to the facts with your host, Dan Bongino.
All right, welcome to the Dan Bongino Show. Producer Joe, how are you today?
I'm just waiting to see what you're going to start off with.
I know, you were asking me that before the show because there's so much going on. As expected yesterday, the Manafort WikiLeaks story is Julian Assange meeting with Manafort at the embassy story is slowly unraveling, the Guardian unwinding it. But as I told you yesterday, there's always a reason for this stuff. So I'm going to get into some of that today, too, and what's really going on right now, hence the John Brennan, former CIA director under the Obama administration, freakout. Also, just one quick note of congratulations to the audience. I love you all so much. Jesse Kelly is back on Twitter, Iraq war veteran. Ran for Congress. He's an edgy tweeter, so let's say, on Twitter. But Twitter, I guess, realizing the conservative backlash was going to be severe on this and was severe, has reinstated his account. Now, having said that, they still have not retweeted other conservatives who they've deleted off the platform. So we're going to keep the heat on. And here's my suggestion for you. Yesterday, I suggested that we that we look into Twitter being reclassified as a publisher and not a platform. Listen to yesterday's show, and I'll give you more details on that. But today, I want to suggest also that you sell any stock you have in Twitter. I sold mine, so I don't speak with forked tongue. You may have it in your portfolio somewhere. You may not even know you have it. Sell it. Sell it. Listen, I'm not a financial advisor, folks, but I would not buy stock in a company that criticizes conservatives. Do your thing. Again, if it's in your financial interest for the future and it's your nest egg, I understand you think it's a good investment. I don't want to get, but I'm just telling you as a matter of personal dislike on my part for a company that targets me, I dumped mine. Get rid of that stock. Forget it. I mean, it's a nightmare.
Yeah.
Why would you be involved with a company that deliberately targets conservatives or is trying to? So that's what there you go.
I'm going to have to check in with corporate first there, Dan.
Yeah, I know. See if you have in your portfolio there. Yeah. Hold on, I got to put my fan on. It's getting hot in here already. My wife was dying this morning. It was like 50 degrees in Florida. Now that we've got the new northeast cold out of us, she's not used to it anymore. All right, folks, today's show brought to you by our friends at Saucy. Hey, everybody at some point wish they could just have a beer, wine, or liquor delivered. Well, someone finally decided to do something about it. Introducing Saucy. Code Dan, my first campaign manager. The first story was this Guardian story that he allegedly met with Julian Assange at the Ecuadorian embassy. Now, I explained in yesterday's show what I think is going on there. I think the real scandal is we're being played by people connected to the Russian government who are somehow meeting with Assange through lobbyists, and they're trying to cover that up because these same lobbyists are connected to Democrats. I'll get to that in a second. But there's a freak out going on because I think what's happening here, there was another leak, by the way, that Manafort's lawyers had spoken to Trump's lawyers team, which is perfectly legal. There's nothing illegal about it. The reason this is happening is Manafort is just telling them the truth. And the truth is completely uncomfortable for them. The truth does not involve Trump-Russia collusion. Folks, I think we're being played. I want you to pay close attention to this. Now, I put an article up today at the show notes from that covers my speech that I gave that's gone viral on YouTube. It's one of the first articles up there. It's from the American Spectator by a guy named Frank Hawkins. He covered my speech. I'd like you to listen to the speech. It's now up to, I think, 700,000 downloads on YouTube. It's gone nuclear pretty quickly. But I explained to you what happened here, and the gist of this is why we're in a bit of a freak out and why Manafort has become the subject of this whole thing. I promise I'll tie this up for you, okay? Ladies and gentlemen, there's a figure that surfaces in this Spygate saga over and over and over again who is deeply connected into the Russian government and knows people, influential people within the Russian government, and was an ally of Putin for a very long time. His name is Oleg Deripaska. Yeah, Deripaska's name comes up in almost every facet of this entire saga. Deripaska had a business relationship with Paul Manafort for a very long time. As a matter of fact, if you go back to a 2007 article by Glenn Simpson in the Wall Street Journal, let me read you the title so you can Google it yourself. I'm not going to put it in the show notes because it's subscriber only. But the title of the article is, I got to scroll, it's a very long one. How Lobbyists Help Ex-Soviets Woo Washington by Glenn Simpson and his wife, Mary Jacoby. It's from 2007. Mm-hmm. If you read that piece, it's fascinating because it describes in there an effort by the ex-Soviets, by Russians, to influence the United States government. Who makes a cameo appearance in that show? Paul Manafort and Oleg Deripaska. What do I think they're hiding here? Folks, I think the Democrats fully understand at this point that that they are playing right into Russian hands. They're in the Russian operation to sow discord in the United States is not a partisan one. Folks, the Russians don't care if the Democrats or the Republicans win. The Russians care that the United States loses. I want to be crystal clear on this. And the Manafort stuff's going to make sense in a second, but I got to backtrack because I think people are losing what's going on here. The Russians are not our friends. This is obvious. Everybody gets that. The Democrats, though, want you to believe that Trump is a Russian ally. He is not a Russian ally. The Russians can't stand the American president, whether it was Hillary or Donald Trump. The Russians see us as a foe, as an only a foe. They don't see us as anything else. They are not an ally of Trump. The Democrats, now, by the way, the Republicans capitulate on that idea. Sensible conservatives, libertarians, and Republicans understand they have differences on how we should handle it, but no sensible person out there thinks Russia's our friend on this international stage. They are not.
Yeah.
Now, I said sensible, so that doesn't include Capitol Hill Democrats who want you to believe that Russia is a friend to Donald Trump. They are not. They are trying to sow discord. Now, this key player keeps appearing in this case, Deripaska, this Russian connected deeply to Putin, this we know, in a number of different places. And I'm going to ask you the question. Let me give you the headline up front. Is the Russian government working through people like Deripaska and others to play both sides? Are we being played by the Russians right now? Let's make some connections here for you. Mm-hmm. So Deripaska, who we know is connected to Vladimir Putin, right? Mm-hmm. Who we know is a Russian, we know is influential. Mm-hmm. Deripaska is connected to Julian Assange. How? He's connected to Assange through a lobbyist by the name of Adam Waldman, I covered yesterday, who visited Julian Assange in this Ecuadorian embassy more than anyone else. That is a lobbyist who has a significant business relationship with Deripaska. I'm not suggesting Deripaska visited Assange. I'm telling you the lobbyist that's working with him and a lawyer who works with Deripaska visited Assange, right? Mm-hmm. Deripaska's also obviously connected to Waldman through Assange. Waldman, this lawyer working with Deripaska, is also communicating with the Democrat Mark Warner on the Senate Intel Committee. Deripaska is also working with the FBI because we know the FBI, or was I should say to be precise, was approached by the FBI for information about Donald Trump before the election. Deripaska's also at an economic forum, coincidentally at the same time as a guy by the name of Sergei Milian, who is alleged to be Source D for the FBI. For Source D for Christopher Steele, in the dossier. Mm-hmm. Source D is the source that gives up the perverted sexual stuff in the dossier. There are reports that Sergei Milian was the source who gave that information up about the Trump team. Right around the time some of that stuff surfaces, Deripaska's at a conference with Milian. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm asking you if it's possible, just possible, that the Russian government is feeding information to a lobbyist, Waldman, who's feeding it to a Democrat on the Senate, Mark Warner. We know, we have their text. Who's feeding information or getting information from the Ecuadorian embassy in Julian Assange. Who's also giving information that they heard or passing information on to a source that gets back to the dossier. Who is also connected, by the way, to the guy who wrote the dossier and Christopher Steele. Why? Because the lobbyist working with Deripaska, Adam Waldman, is also working with Christopher Steele. Why do we know that? Because we have the text between Waldman, the lawyer for Deripaska, and Mark Warner, the Democrat, where Waldman starts talking about setting up a meeting with Christopher Steele. So we have this. Think about what I'm saying, Joe. If it doesn't make sense, stop me, because this is critical here. You have a connected Russian, deeply connected to people inside the Russian machinery, the Russian apparatus. This guy, Deripaska, who shows up in a 2007 piece, right? 2007, not 2017. Wall Street Journal piece written by who? Glenn Simpson, the guy who hires Christopher Steele at the behest of Hillary Clinton, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. Hillary Clinton's team hires Glenn Simpson at Fusion GPS to generate negative information on Trump. They go out and hire Christopher Steele. Christopher Steele produces the dossier. The dossier has information in it about these sexually perverted things that comes from a guy, allegedly, that's at a conference the same time this Russian, Deripaska, who shows up everywhere, is at the conference too. The story written in 2007 by Glenn Simpson mentions who? Deripaska. Yeah. And his business deals with Manafort, and mentions how Deripaska is one of those Russians trying to influence policy in the United States. He's telling us in 2007 exactly what happened. The Glenn Simpson 2007 piece about Russians trying to influence policy in the United States is the whole movie script already written out in advance.
Now, the ombudsman here, as you're speaking, as you're walking us along, I can follow it. But I hope I don't sound too stupid here. There's so many contacts. What a tangled web we weave. When we leave what you're talking about, I almost can't recall it. It's a lot of
think of it this way.
Does that make sense?
If we had sometimes Joe and I are working on video, so don't worry. Think of it this way. Let me visualize this for you, folks. If you looked at a pyramid, and at the top, you had Oleg Deripaska, who is, let's just be absolutely crystal clear, is connected to Vladimir Putin. They are friends. This is not in dispute, right? They are associates of each other. This guy Deripaska, there's a fork in the road going here, a fork in the road going there, but they all seem to lead back to him. Mm-hmm. So we know this whole case is based on a dossier, right? A dossier that Trump did this, that Trump was working with the Russians, that Trump did these perverted things in a hotel room. Mm-hmm. All of those allegations can somehow be tied connection-wise to people connected to Deripaska. Mm-hmm. Okay. What I'm trying to suggest to you is, were the Russians feeding information through multiple channels using the American court system and the FBI to sow massive political discord in the United States, and we're still playing into it this day. Gotcha. It explains the Manafort leaks yesterday. It explains why Manafort doesn't know anything about Russian collusion, folks, because it didn't happen. So in order to keep the Manafort story hot and the heat on Donald Trump, these leaks start coming out again. Oh, Manafort leaked. Manafort met with Julian Assange at the embassy. Where did they get that from, The Guardian? Did that come from Russian sources? Where did that come from? Well, Manafort's suing now because he's saying the meeting didn't happen. Folks, are we getting played the whole time? All I'm trying to tell you is, when you look back to all these streams of negative information that are designed to disrupt the United States government, negative information about everybody, they all seem to have a common thread in someone connected to the Russian government, and we're using it, is the point.
Right.
Instead of questioning where the information came from. If someone was trying to break up the Dan Bongino show, hey, Joe Armacost is stealing quarters from your quarter jar in the kitchen. Oh. Don't you want to know where the information came from? If it was a Russian competitor, I'd be very suspicious of that information because I don't have a quarter jar in the kitchen. But it's like nobody questioned that. Adam Waldman, lobbyist working for a Russian, is also connected to the British guy providing negative information on the Trump team. The same lobbyist is also appearing at the Ecuadorian embassy with Julian Assange, who says they have Democrat emails. He's also at this economic conference, the same time this source gives up information on the Trump team about these perverted things that happened in a hotel. I want to know, and you should ask this question too, and I'll leave it at this. Is Deripaska, is he patient zero? That's where I'm going with this whole thing.
All right.
Is he paragraph 1?
All right.
Is Deripaska working with people in the Russian government to start this whole thing, knowing politically inclined people like John Brennan, Obama, and Hillary Clinton's team would eat it up right away, understanding the whole time patient zero may have been a disinformation campaign, but the disinformation campaign benefited them politically, so they ran with it. Now does it make sense?
Deripaska is a common denominator here. Is that
the common denominator? Right? Yeah. Everything.
Yeah.
He's connected to all of the major players in this. And all the way back in 2007, Glenn Simpson already wrote a piece about Deripaska's trying to influence U.S. policy. Simpson already knows this. Was Glenn Simpson selling this information from Deripaska, already knowing that it was a disinformation campaign? Simpson understanding the whole time that the Hillary Clinton team didn't care if the information was bogus, that they were just going to scoop it up anyway, even if it fed into the Russian desire to put a major political schism in the country. Folks, I get this part is complicated, but it explains everything about Manafort today. How the Mueller team, to cover all of this up, Hillary's use of Russian disinformation and the Obama administration's use of Russian disinformation cleaned and laundered through the British, whether they knew it or not, is this an effort by the Mueller team to hide all of that? That this is a Russian collusion scandal with the Obama administration. That's why Manafort met with Julian Assange too. Did he? Did he really? It's just an effort to keep your attention off Waldman's meetings with Julian Assange. Were the Russians, did they play us for idiots the whole time? Folks, this goes back a long, long way. This goes back to 2015, where I think the Russians understood that there was a deep schism within the United States intel community that was targeting people on targeting U.S. citizens. I think the Russians understood they could use that and understood that the Obama administration was eager to use negative intelligence, whether it was real or not, to target their political enemies. How do I know this? There's an interesting piece in the American Spectator about an effort as far back as 2015 to target Lieutenant General Michael Flynn. Let me read to you a snippet from the piece. It's going to make you remember what we're talking about. Please, this is an important show.
Yeah.
We're talking about Patient Zero being a Russian who is at the center of a lot of this effort by the Russian government to put negative information into the U.S. political system, where instead of a nonpartisan intelligence actor saying, hey, this is just the Russians messing with us, the Obama administration said, oh, give us more, even though they knew it was BS because they knew it would hit their political opponents. And what I'm suggesting to you is the Russians may have got wind of the Obama administration's willingness to put standard intelligence practices aside for political means as far back as 2015. Why? From this American Spectator piece, it's in the show notes. This is a must read. British spies were in on the ground floor of Obamagate. Long before even the first Republican primary, they had been passing conjecture disguised as, quote, intelligence to John Brennan about the Trump campaign. In fact, Brennan was spying on Mike Flynn before he even joined the campaign, as reported by the UK Guardian. British intelligence first became aware in late 2015 of suspicious interactions, listen to this, this is 2015, between figures connected to Trump, they're talking about Mike Flynn, Joe, and known or suspected Russian agents, a source close to UK intelligence said. The intelligence was passed on to the U.S. as part of, quote, routine exchanges of information, they added. The key Trump figure referred to here is Mike Flynn. Folks, I am deeply sorry if this is complicated, but this is absolutely critical. You understand this in light of the Manafort thing. Manafort knows all the players in this. Manafort is a subject of Glenn Simpson's ire as far back as 2007 for his efforts to lobby on behalf of Ukrainians and his business deals with Deripaska and some Russians. They figure this is an in here. Manafort's an in to connect all of this mess about Soviet influence or ex-Soviet influence in the United States. Manafort's the in to connect this all to Trump, despite the fact that Trump has nothing to do with it. They fired Manafort. They need Manafort to be at the Ecuadorian embassy to rope him into this whole collusion email scheme. They need him there. Someone's leaking this strategically right around the time the Mueller thing is wrapping up to rope the Trump team back in to an email conspiracy that the Trump team has nothing to do with. Someone's leaking this. May I suggest to you that the genesis of this stuff may be Russians using somehow friendlies to get this information into the United States media, knowing they're suckers for the Democrat Party to sow discord. What does that have to do with the passage I just read? Folks, Lieutenant General Mike Flynn, the Russians can't stand him. Why? Lieutenant General Flynn, when he was working at the DIA, the Defense Intelligence Agency, in the Obama administration, was an outspoken and vocal opponent of the Iran deal. He understood the Iran deal was going to do damage. The Obama administration needed the Iran deal. It's a long story, but the Obama administration wanted to rebalance power away from the Saudis, their new rapprochement with the Israelis, and back towards the Shia arc with Iran at the head of it. Why, we can speculate for days. But the Obama administration wanted to empower Iran at the expense of the Saudis and others. The Iran deal was going to be the economic center of that. It was going to give Iran back money and power and take them off the sanctions list. Flynn was an outspoken opponent of this. Flynn becomes a target back as far as 2015. He becomes a target, and the UK, according to the Guardian's article, is passing information about Flynn and a dinner he had where this Russian woman showed up. The allegations in the report are that a spy passed on information about the dinner and some suspicious activity between Flynn and this Russian woman. The allegations are that a spy connected to the British and connected to the United States, the Central Intelligence Agency, passed this information on. Who's that spy? Stefan Halper. The same exact spy, Central Intelligence Agency asset, who shows up emailing George Papadopoulos later on, trying to get Papadopoulos to admit that he knows about Russian emails. Folks, do you see what's going on here? As far back as 2015, people associated with U.S. intelligence are trying to rope in a lieutenant general, a heroic patriot in the United States, Mike Flynn, into a Russian whatever scandal. At that point, they probably didn't call it collusion. They just probably called it inappropriate conversations or whatever with Russians. And the same players are involved as far back as 2015. The template's already written. Use the Russians who have some kind of person at this dinner, this Russian woman. Use the Russians to communicate somehow with Mike Flynn, however innocuous these conversations were. And Flynn insists to this day that the dinner conversation with the woman was innocent. Use those conversations to make an insinuation that Flynn somehow is having inappropriate dealings with the Russians. But how does the information get back to us? Again, through people connected to the United Kingdom's intelligence services, and the same name, Stefan Halper, appears in that story. The Obama administration needed the Russians. They were their allies on the Iran deal. The more I read about this, the more grossed out, I am by this story. Also in the story, as far back as 2015, John Brennan, director of the Central Intelligence Agency under Barack Obama. Yeah, the founder of the corrupt feast.
Yeah.
John Brennan is having these director-level meetings with people. They're getting intelligence from UK officials. What are they getting intelligence on? A dinner Mike Flynn was at? It's just a Russian happened to be there? Did you notice how these key Russians keep appearing around people who were Obama administration enemies and later the Trump team, and in Flynn's case, someone who later appeared in the Trump team? These Russians keep appearing around them, and it's used later on as evidence of some kind of collusive activity? Brilliant! These Russians keep appearing everywhere.
Yeah.
But the information somehow keeps getting back to the Central Intelligence Agency, which should say to you in our intelligence outfits that, folks, this is some kind of a setup.
Oh, dude.
Now, also, does it make sense why Lieutenant General Flynn became a target of Obama during the transition? Remember this story. This is important.
Mm-hmm.
Obama has a meeting with President-elect Trump in the White House. There's one specific person out of all the conversations they could have, Joe. One specific person's name comes up. Obama says to Trump, hey, don't hire this guy. He's real trouble. Who's the guy? Mike Flynn. Mike Flynn.
There you go.
Because he knows. Mike Flynn knows everything.
Yep.
Flynn's the DIA director. He has access to this stuff. Flynn probably realizes he was the subject of some activity targeting him by his own government. So Obama begs Trump not to hire Flynn. Trump does hire Flynn. Hires him as the national security advisor. What happens just days after he's hired? Sally Yates, known Obama bootlicker and butt kisser, shows up at the White House. She's the deputy attorney general at the time and says, hey, President Trump, excuse me, we got a problem. Somehow we have this recording and transcript of Mike Flynn talking to the Russian ambassador Kislyak. Wow. How do you have that? Oh, yeah, we unmasked him. Oh, you did? You basically wiretapped your national security advisor? That's interesting. When he was, when he was in the transition process, that's fascinating how that happened. So we have this transcript of Flynn talking to the Russian ambassador, and it doesn't exactly marry up with what he told FBI agents in an interview. So he could be the subject of a bribery trap, a blackmail trap, excuse me, which is nonsense. Total, complete, utter nonsense. That's a fabricated, nonsensical story. How is he going to be the subject of a blackmail trap if the Trump administration and Flynn already knew what he said? May have had forgotten some of the details, but the details were irrelevant towards blackmail. It was already going to be Trump administration policy anyway. And what happens? They dismiss Mike Flynn. Mike Flynn is later arrested and charged and prosecuted on charges of lying to the FBI, despite the fact that the FBI themselves say they don't believe he was being dishonest. Folks, listen to me. This is a setup from as far back as 2015. Now, by the way, another thing. I'm sorry, but now does the multiple dossiers story make sense now? Victoria Nuland and others in the Obama administration were testifying, people from the State Department and others. Uh-huh. And in that testimony, it came out that the Trump dossier was not the only one. So I've said to you over and over that this is a big scandal because although the Trump team was targeted because they won the Republican primary and became the nominee, this is not just about Trump. This effort by the United States to use any interaction with Russians by their political enemies as evidence of nonsense collusion charges goes back all the way to the 2015 targeting of Mike Flynn at a dinner where some Russian woman shows up. And that information, unbelievably, is used against Flynn, despite the fact there's no evidence he did anything wrong. Mm-hmm. And the same spies keep showing up, and they're connected to our guys. While Brennan is meeting with the United Kingdom. Now also, read the Spectator piece as well. Does it explain the panic about the declassification?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Folks, the declassification of the FISA documents, where they indicate, apparently in these FISA documents, used to spy on Carter Page, how they got the information they got, right? That's going to be in there. The British are freaking out in the United Kingdom because they say it's going to expose sources and methods. Forget the methods. That's not what they're worried about. What they're worried about is they can no longer plausibly deny things. None of the names in that document are going to be new. When it's exposed, Downer, Halper, it's only the fact that the British are no longer going to be able to say they weren't an intermediary, a third party that was cleaning information from other sources to give it back to the United States, used to spy on Obama's political enemies. That's why they're panicking. It's no more difficult than that to understand. The British now, because it hasn't been declassified, can say, I don't know. Remember what Patriot Games, that Jack Ryan movie with Harrison Ford? Plausible deniability. Plausible. In other words, can I deny this plausibly? The British can because the documents haven't been unredacted yet. There's still blackouts in them. Once the documents become public and they were sworn to in a U.S. court and we're all reading the UK's involvement in this, the British are no longer going to be able to say they did not try to impact an American election by couriering information into the U.S. intelligence system from, quotes, other parties. The real scandal here, folks, to bring this all the way back to how I started, is the Russians played us all. And when I say us all, I don't mean the listening audience. I mean the Five Eyes intelligence outlets. The Russians played all of them for suckers. They used disinformation from Russian sources I suspect one of them at some point, may have come from people connected to Putin, based on what I've already told you. The Russians fed disinformation to friendly intelligence outlets, the United Kingdom, Hillary Clinton's people, Fusion GPS, which was subsequently used to target American citizens to create a political schism in the United States that the Democrats knew about. And instead of saying, hey, this is the Russians messing with us, they said, yeah, we know they're messing with us, but let's use it anyway because it makes Trump look bad. You dig?
Yep. Yes, sir.
This is bad news, man.
Yeah.
All right. I got to get to this. Today's show also brought to you by I'll Go Away Later. And I'm listening to the speech and I'm saying, this guy's big trouble. Now, I'm not in the prediction game anymore. I'm going to try to get out of that. We were like 2 for 3 in the last few, but 2 out of 3 is bad in contrast to the Meatloaf song, right? Isn't that 2 out of 3 ain't bad? Yeah. No, 2 out of 3 is bad. You got to be right all the time. So I'm going to get out of the prediction game, but I am going to say this. That guy I saw in that hotel room, I called my wife immediately. She remembers this phone call. I was sitting in the Shelbourne Hotel in Manhattan on the 7th floor. You remember where I was? And I said to her, this guy's big trouble. This guy is going to win something big one day, whether it's the presidency or he's going to become a significant political leader in the future. That person was Barack Obama. He was Senator Barack Obama at the time. But I heard that speech and I knew right away that he had managed to tap into something. Folks, be very careful. There's another Barack Obama out there right now who speaks in similar hopey, changey type of talk. Listen, he doesn't stand for anything. He's an inch deep and 2 feet wide. Frankly, just like Obama was with his policies. They were. The policies were shallow and not well thought out. But the speeches were aspirational and were powerful. And for us to deny that is like the Democrats denying that the Trump effect was real. It doesn't do us any good. That other person out there right now is Beto O'Rourke. Folks, keep your antenna up. I have a story up at the show notes today from The Hill. It looks like Beto's testing the waters for a 2020 presidential run. I'm telling you right now, mark this episode. This guy is real trouble. Real trouble. He's a far leftist. His policies are empty, but he has managed to tap into something on the Democrat side aspirationally that Obama did as well.
Dan, I can hear our listeners right now. They're telling me he lost, dude. What are you talking about?
He did. He did lose in Texas.
Yeah.
But his performance in Texas, Joe, compared to where other Democrats have historically performed in statewide races over the last few, is remarkable. And for us to deny that does us no good. He should have lost that race by 10 points against Ted Cruz, and he didn't. But he lose by 4?
Something like that.
That race was unusually close. Unusually close. I'm just giving you a heads up. Be very careful. Beto is big, big trouble for the Republicans. All right. I have some interesting pieces up in the show notes today. Our resident debunker-in-chief, Matt Palumbo, was kind enough to put together a piece about the actual cost of illegal immigration in the United States. I'm getting so fed up and tired of far-left talking points on illegal immigration, folks. Listen, immigration, when done correctly, in a labor-sensitive market, done according to the principles of law and order, legal immigration can and typically is a net economic positive benefit for the country in the long term. When it's done in the right way, legally, controlled, sensitive to labor markets, it is usually an economic net benefit. Illegal immigration is an economic burden on our country. I don't care who tells you otherwise. Now I'm going to give you the numbers to back this up because I am so tired of hearing from leftists about how legal immigration benefits us when done the right way. Illegal immigration does not. Here are the actual costs. Matt has the piece up. The numbers are in the show notes for you to spread around if you so wish. Illegal immigrants pay taxes, Joe, because you hear this number a lot, as Matt points out. They go, well, illegal immigrants pay $12 billion in taxes annually. Oh, well, great. Well, that's a huge number. Interesting. Yeah, only interesting compared to the actual numbers that would have been paid if these were actual tax-paying citizens in those jobs. Illegals pay at a lower rate than tax-paying citizens. Matter of fact, Matt points out at such a lower rate that if we were to calculate the rate illegal immigrants pay taxes for the entire country, they pay at such a lower rate that the United States government would raise $240 billion in taxes versus $3 trillion. So the fact that illegal immigrants pay some form of taxes, whether they're sales taxes or otherwise, does not mean that it is a net economic benefit, because even if you're a far left liberal that believes the government should control the money outlets, the money they're bringing in is far less. Joe, do you see why this is?
Yeah.
If you're illegally working in the United States, you're not paying federal income taxes.
Hell no.
Because you're here illegally. You're either working off the books, you're working somehow under a stolen Social Security number. You're likely avoiding the income tax load. Mm-hmm. You're also, in many cases, but not all, but most cases, you're bringing in a lesser set of skills. You're seeking out labor markets, and you're working for a lower wage than Americans would have worked for, which would have meant higher income tax revenue, in addition to the fact that you're off the books anyway in a large part of these cases, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they're paying at a lower rate than if American citizens would have been in those jobs. The education costs for the children of illegal immigrants that come into the country, depending on the estimate you use, $44 to $59 billion in education costs. So we're talking about massive losses in tax revenue because they're not paying taxes. A lot of this is going off the books, or it's being done under Social Security, stolen Social Security numbers. A lot of it's being done because you'll work for wages lesser than an American citizen would have worked for. Finally, the healthcare costs. A lot of leftist activists will point out the fact that, well, Joe, you're not eligible for a lot of federal Medicaid benefits and things like that if you're in the country illegally. Okay, fair enough. But ladies and gentlemen, when you show up in an American emergency room, it is one of our more humane policies. I don't disagree with the policy, but when you show up in an emergency room, we're not going to let you die.
Right.
That costs money. If you are here illegally in the country, you are costing the United States government, by one of Matt's estimates, he has in the piece, and you can see how he calculated, $18.5 billion in healthcare costs. You are here illegally. There are real costs associated with this. Matt estimates the total cost of illegal immigration every year at $100 billion. Illegal immigration. Stop telling us this is a net economic gain to the United States. It is not. The numbers belie that. Medical costs, education costs. This is costing us money. And it's not being reimbursed by the tax load that illegal immigrants are bearing through sales taxes and otherwise, because they're not paying taxes in many cases. Stop with the nonsense. This article is important, especially now. Okay, a couple other things I had out there. There's this. I take screenshots of stuff so I can get you the accurate information. Matt did another piece because there's another myth floating around out there now that the Democrats are getting back, working their way, weaseling their way back into power. Which they did in this last election. Well, I shouldn't say it, but they won. And I don't want to be like liberals are to us. And they didn't steal the damn thing, but they ran on a bunch of garbage. Yeah, is probably the best way to say it. So the Nancy Pelosi's about to take back the speaker's gavel, take over control of the House. And one of the things they're going to argue for now is a tax hike. They want the Trump tax cuts to go away. And one of the myths I've heard out there being propagated by the liberal media, again, the activists in the media, is that, these tax cuts didn't benefit the middle class. They screwed over the middle class. No, you're lying. You're making that up. Yeah, you're darn right. You're just making that up. I have the numbers for you in this piece by Matt Palumbo. All right, before I get to that, somebody just do this last read. Just be patient with us, and I will get to that. I will get to the numbers so you can debunk myths generated by your liberal friends. All right, Omaha Steaks. I just had them last. For each bracket, folks, if you are wealthy, code BONG for perfectly brown screenshot, and I'm going to read to you the numbers right now so you can debunk this nonsense. The Trump's tax cuts composed of both corporate tax reform, which cut the rate from 35 to 21%, and across-the-board cuts to individual tax brackets. Here is the percentage point decline for each bracket. Folks, if you are wealthy in this country, if you are in the 37% tax bracket, it was 39.6, it's now 37. This is the highest tax bracket for the highest earners, right? Your taxes went down 1.6%, your tax rate. Okay, so Joe, keep these numbers in your head, folks. This isn't hard. If you are one of the wealthiest earners in our country, your tax rate went down from 39.6 to 37, so it went down 1.6 percentage points. If you are in the second highest tax bracket, you're well off, but you may not be rich. Your taxes went down from 33 to 32%. So you got a 1% tax rate. You may say, all right, Dan, well, the rich got over more. They got 1.6 percentage points. And the a little bit less than rich got 1 percentage point. Oh, but now we're getting into the middle class tax brackets, Joe. Oh, look at these numbers. Aren't they convenient? The middle class got a tax cut from 28% tax rate to a 24% tax rate, a 4 percentage point cut. 1.6. 1.6. Joe, what's greater, 4 or 1.6? Take a second to think about that.
Oh,
can you handle it? What's greater?
4%.
4% is greater. So, do you understand the liberals are just making this up? Oh, the rich got over on this. No, the middle class got a bigger percentage point tax cut than the wealthy did. 1.6. 1.6. I don't know if there's some kind of song we have to invent. By the way, we got to get to your tune. That was funny. So we got to play that song. It's so good. But 1.6. How many times do I got to say this? You know that sometimes when these companies, remember back in the 50s and 60s, there was always a jingle.
Yeah.
Use our product. It's wonderful today. It was these goofy little jingles, and you couldn't get the stupid songs out of your head forever. You all know what I'm talking about, right? You remember some of those?
Hated them.
Yeah,
They drive me nuts.
everybody hated them, but you never forgot them.
Yeah.
Right? Do we invent a jingle for yourself to remember that the wealthy got a 1.6 percentage point tax rate cut and the middle class?
That was a Chicago song, 1.6 to 4.
Is that a song?
25 or 6 to 4. That was the name of the song. But it sounded close. Yeah.
Was it? Or that, remember that? Here's what was that other one? 8675309. Who would remember that number outside of the song? The way you code it in your brain is different. I don't mean to get off, but that's it's 4% for the middle class. Now, you may say, okay, there are even poorer folks because it's broken down into quintiles. 20%, the top 20%, the 20% below that, 20%. So you may say, okay, Dan, so the middle class got 4 points off their tax rate. What did the people who were a little less well off than the middle class get? Clearly, the rich got over on them with their 1.6 percentage point cut. Well, if you're in the tax bracket below that, you were paying 25%. You're now paying 22%, which is, hold on. That is a decrease of 3 percentage points, which by my simple math is almost double the 1.6 percentage points that the evil rich, the Democrats call, as they call you, the evil rich got off. I'm not crazy, right? Like this math actually works out. Yeah. Now, the last thing and all these charts are in the piece, so please check it out, Bongino.com. You may say, well, clearly, the bottom 20% of earners, excuse me, the bottom 20% of earners, the poorest Americans by the tax code, clearly got screwed over. The rich got 1.6 percentage points off. Just about every other tax bracket got off more than that. In some cases, the middle class specifically got double with a 4 percentage point decrease in their tax rate. Clearly, because the Democrats are right, the poor got screwed over by this. Okay, let's go to the numbers again. If you are in the lowest tax bracket, you were paying 15%. The second lowest. You were paying 15%. You are now paying 12%, a decrease of 3 points again. So, folks, you have the second lowest quintile gets 3% off. On top of that, 3% off. The middle class, maybe upper middle class, gets 4% off. Wealthy, but not the highest tax bracket, gets 1% off, and the wealthy based on the tax bracket get 1.6. Do you understand they're just making this stuff up? This is why we have the debunk this section on our website, because this is a complete, utter, total fabrication. They're making this whole entire thing up. The majority of the benefit went to people who were not in the top two tax brackets. The majority of the benefit went to the middle class and below. That's just a fact. I get it. Facts are hard. I understand you media types too, who like to engage in liberal propaganda, who put this stuff out there that the middle class somehow got screwed over by this tax cut package. This is going to come up. Ladies and gentlemen, you have the numbers. Keep the piece on your phone. There's a handy chart. Matt put some little big red numbers in there. You can read it yourself. It is just a complete fabrication and is made up. And it's tiresome. All right, Matt was nice enough to do another piece, too. I wanted to get to this the other day, but I didn't have any time. About so-called free college.
Oh.
Yeah, free college is always a good one. I love how things are free. The left is just free, like the money fairy. Oh, it's free. Yeah, it's free. Nobody paid for anything anyway. I love when they talk about free. Someone volunteered their time? What do you mean free college? The teachers aren't getting paid. They're volunteering their time. The architect who built the building did it voluntarily. The janitors, the administrative staff are all working. No, they're getting paid. Oh, so it's not free. So somebody's paying for it because they're paying the teachers, right? So Matt did a piece debunking this idea of free college. It's a really good one because it points out the myths about the Scandinavian examples. You know, the left and Bernie Sanders and these types, Joe. They're like, oh, free college. Look, in Denmark and other countries, look what happens. They get free college and everybody scores. It's so great. It's so wonderful. Wrong. Matt has a couple great takeaways from this. Number one, debt. Student debt for free college is comparable to student debt for paid university educations here in the United States. Yeah, wait. How is that? You're like, this can't pot. Jackie? Now, even I get it. Even some smart conservatives may be like, well, that doesn't make any sense. How is it that if the taxpayers are paying for college in some of these Scandinavian countries, Sweden, Norway, and others, how is it that the students are still taking debt to pay if their tax dollars are already paying for it? Matt's a genius. This is great, Joe. Listen to this. I was very impressed. Good job, Matt Palumbo. He says, and it's in the piece in the show notes, right? So Sanders would probably be just as shocked as I was to learn that there is student debt in Scandinavia despite their lack of university tuition. Not only that, there's a lot of debt. Because, Joe, while tuition is free, room and board are not.
Oh!
So paradoxically, this is great. Offering free tuition seems to have incentivized students to be more likely to rack up debt by moving out early to go to college to take care of because take advantage of the free thing. But the room and board is not free. While it's becoming more common for American students to save money by living at home and attending a 2-year community college, there's less incentive to do so with, quote, free tuition. Genius observation. If the tuition's free, hey, Mom, I'm moving out. Ma, the meatloaf, I'm out of here. I'm gone. The tuition's free, but the room and board isn't. Here are the numbers, how much debt they wind up accumulating where college is, quote, free. Because there's no market incentive to get a bargain in your education. Like American students who go, hey, you know what? I'm not going to waste 2 years. I'll go to community college first, stay home, save some money, and then I'll go on to Harvard or Princeton or whatever, Penn State, where I went for graduate school, or City University. Matt writes, in 2015, Swedes who borrowed to attend college had an average of $17,266 in debt. In Norway, the average student debt graduated with $280,000 in their currency. That denominates to $32,000 in U.S. dollars in debt. For contrast, the American student debt for someone graduating in America's class of 2015, where we got the data from, was approximately $30,000. So in Norway, where education is, quote, free, their average debt is $2,000 more in the United States, where it's not, quote, free. Hey, kids, you may want to think about that. You know, when you sit there and buy into the leftist hype about free college, nothing's free. Somebody's paying. You may say, oh, well, the solution then, Joe, is to have the government pick up room and board too.
Yeah.
So we can pay not 50 and 60% of our income to taxes. We can pay 70, 85%. In that case, you'll be working for the government full time. Good luck with that. Have fun. Hey, one final story. I'm sorry, but I'm cleaning up a lot of stuff that I wanted to get to earlier in the week that's really important because I've been so tied up with this Manafort thing. And again, just in the beginning, I want you to understand that whole beginning we were talking about is critical. How the Russians are the genesis of all of this stuff. And the Obama administration scooped it up and used it knowing it was a disinformation campaign to attack Trump. The Mueller probe is trying to break all of those ties to the Obama administration and still keep the attention on Trump. It's clear as day right now. It's important we get that out there. Folks, I'd warned you about our debt and our economic situation, that it was perilous. I've said this multiple times, that this is really, we're in a very dangerous time, that our national debt, we owe a lot of money. in order to finance the functioning of our government as liberals and rhino conservatives want it, we have to borrow massive amounts of money. Why do we have to borrow massive amounts of money? We have to do so because we don't have enough tax dollars to finance right now all of these expenditures. Our defense budget, our entitlement programs, Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare, discretionary spending, we don't have enough money. This is clear. If Joe's spending $100,000 a year and he only makes 50, he's got to borrow 50.
Mm-hmm.
Sooner or later, people who are lending Joe money are going to ask for their money back. I had said to you, we are about to hit a debt apocalypse sometime in the future, and it's going to hit us quick, where at some point someone says, we're not lending you clowns money anymore. You can't get your act together. I'm not talking about us clowns. I'm talking about the Hill. These idiots up on Capitol Hill spending us off a fiscal cliff. Now, those people are both us. We buy U.S. bonds, U.S. treasuries, and foreign governments, which have lent the United States government a lot of money. I'd said to you that when this materializes, it's going to materialize, Joe, in the form of higher interest rates. Folks, there's some warning signs out there. Let me read from you from a piece in Reuters. They're talking about bond auctions. In other words, asking foreign governments for money. They're auctioning bonds. Hey, come in, buy our money, buy our bonds, lend us money. Some bond auctions since late October had the weakest foreign participation rates in nearly a decade, a Reuters analysis of U.S. Treasury sales shows. At the same time, auction sizes are rising fast, with bond issuance this quarter projected to set a record of $83 billion after deducting mature debt. This this economist at Deutsche Bank said, we do worry about where demand for Treasury is going to come from, given the ongoing significant increase in supply. Ladies and gentlemen, what does that mean? People aren't buying our bonds anymore at the rate they were a decade ago. Now, is it apocalyptic now? No. But when this hits, it's going to hit fast. And how is this going to show up in the form of interest rates? When foreign governments and even U.S. citizens stop lending the government money because they're convinced they're not going to get it back, the United States government is going to have to offer what? Very high interest rates to compensate people for the risk. All right, we'll give you 10% rather than 5% or whatever for the bonds. Then what goes up? Mortgage loans, car loans, things that are indexed to the interest rates in the United States that the Federal Reserve. Folks, we're going to be in big, big trouble. You want to pay 16, 17% for a mortgage like you did in the 80s? We got to get a hold of this now. When people stop lending us money, the only way to get them to do it is by offering higher interest rates. The government's going to have to pay off that interest over time, and that interest on top of the debt we have now is absolutely catastrophic. I warned you, but I've been meaning to talk about this story all week. All right, folks, thanks again for tuning in. I really appreciate it. I hope it wasn't too confusing in the beginning, but it's a critical key. How all of this leads back to people connected to Putin, and these guys sucked the whole thing up the whole time. Just incredible. That's why they're trying to rope Manafort in again, to tie this thing all to Trump. It's disgusting. All right, I appreciate you tuning in. Please subscribe to the show. It is free.
All righty, Dan Bongino once again, our resident patriot. Yeah, Gus, it's all about being a simple man. Just don't complicate life. Don't overthink shit, and don't drag stuff into your life that you don't need. Is basically the message. So, popcorn fight. All right. As usual, next up on the list is for our ditto heads in the room, Devra. Rush Limbaugh.
Out of the White House, I'm going to buy a Chevy Volt. He didn't buy a Chevy Volt, and now nobody can because they stopped making them. You know why? Because nobody wanted them. Now, I don't want anybody to misunderstand me here. I don't have an animus toward General Motors, and certainly not the people who work there. But this whole notion that we have been subsidizing the electric car business and who knows whatever else because of this hoax and phony climate change rot gut, all for PR connections rather than actual sound business decisions. It's all coming home to roost here. And it's about time that stuff that nobody wants stops being subsidized. Well, stuff that nobody's buying. Certainly not in the quantities that we were all led to believe. I'll never forget. But by the way, this isn't even what I intended to talk about. I just wanted to let you know I was going to talk about it. But once I get started here, I get revved up. You remember the day where the first Chevy Volt, before it even actually produced a consumer version of the vehicle, they had a prototype and they drove it on a gasoline or diesel-powered truck to Washington. And they parked it in front of the Capitol building. And then a bunch of Democrat congressmen got in the thing and drove it for 10 feet each. And it was to herald the new era of American electric cars, the future. And I remember having a little fun and poking fun at it. And Bob Lutz, I used to be a good friend of the guy, turned on me because I began to make fun of the Volt. And he started blaming me for some problems about, which, by the way, Obama did in his seminar in front of 1,000 people at Rice University. By the way, the seminar was at the James A. Baker Political Institute for building up former Democrat presidents or whatever. And Bill and Hillary, they started their stadium tour in Toronto. And you know what they didn't talk about? They didn't talk about Russia. No, if you listen to Bill and Hillary, the reason Trump is a corrupt creep is because of the arrangements he has with the Saudis. Hillary didn't even want to go to Russia. She didn't want to mention it. Bill didn't know why he was there. The place wasn't even half full, exactly as we predicted. And Hillary had another massive coughing spell while all this was going down. So anyway, we'll talk about the leverage business of the Trump leveraging the fact that these manufacturers need federal subsidies to build these electric cars. I'll get into the details of what Trump is doing here because I'm glad he's using the leverage is the point. But folks, this that we have learned in the last couple of days, actually not learned, confirmed, because I have suspected that this Mueller investigation is itself its own version of a hoax. Precisely because there isn't a crime to investigate. And there never has been a crime to investigate. Now, all this time, from the beginning of the Mueller investigation, we have been told that there's nobody in Washington who has the integrity of Robert Mueller. Nobody has the kind of honor and decency of Robert Mueller. Well, I'm here to tell you that I don't see a shred of evidence of that. The Mueller investigation is a joke. Sadly, it's not a joke to the people that it is ruining. But now some people who are involved in this investigation are starting to speak out and divulge the tactics and the techniques that the Mueller investigation is using. I've quoted from the book by Sidney Powell, License to Lie. It's about the Enron task force and the prosecutorial misconduct there and the Ted Stevens case, the prosecutorial misconduct there. Many of those lawyers, led by Andrew Weissman, are on the Mueller team of prosecutors. These are people who suborned perjury of their own star witnesses in the Ted Stevens trial, which was thrown out by a judge once he learned what was going on. I don't know how these people remain in the Justice Department or sanctioned by the bar to practice law after the things they have been found guilty of doing in the Enron. And the Supreme Court overturned 4 of the 5 Enron convictions. 4 of the 5. Prosecutorial misconduct, and it is rampant. Let me give you an example. Jerome Corsi. How many of you have ever heard of Jerome Corsi? How many of you have ever heard of Roger Stone? You may have heard of Roger Stone. Roger Stone and Jerome Corsi have as much to do with Russian collusion as Mickey Mouse and Minnie Mouse. And yet they have become the latest central players in Mueller's attempt to somehow suggest that the Trump campaign was colluding with Russia. So let me tell you, Corsi was on Tucker's show last night on Fox, Corsi has written for WorldNet Daily. He's written some books. He's, I don't know, close to 80. The idea that Jerome Corsi has anything to do with this is literally absurd. But because they think they found a connection between Corsi and Julian Assange and WikiLeaks and the Podesta emails. Wait a minute, what happened to Trump colluding with Putin? What happened to the Russians tampering with votes? What happened to the Russians colluding? What is this about WikiLeaks? And all these people supposedly connected to WikiLeaks. We had this story yesterday from the UK Guardian that Manafort had met with Assange 3 times. It's not possible. Do you know that when Manafort is alleged to have met with Assange, he was under surveillance by the FBI? He was under surveillance by the Obama DOJ. There is no way he could have met with Assange because he was being watched. And if he did meet with Assange while he was being watched, they would have done something about it then rather than wait now and throw darts against the wall hoping something sticks. Anyway, back to Corsi. They got his laptop. They got all of his emails from way, way back, emails related and unrelated to anything. Then they conduct their interview with him. And they start asking him questions about emails from years ago. And he doesn't remember. But he tries to. He tries to be truthful. He knows what happens if you lie to the FBI. You know, he knows what happens if you lie to federal prosecutors. He's trying to remember this stuff. They ask him questions about emails related and unrelated to whatever they're looking into. They leave the room, and then they come back, and they accuse him of lying to them and show him the emails from years ago from his laptop that they had. So they set him up. What does this have to do with collusion? This is a process crime that has nothing to do with the original purpose of the Mueller investigation whatsoever. Zilch, zero, nada. Listen to Andy McCarthy. He was on Fox this morning being interviewed by Sandra Smith. And he says that the things I just described to you for Corsi, what he was doing, they're not even a crime, for crying out. They're trying to create one of these Martha Stewart lying to investigator crimes. And they're trying to say that this would fulfill their notion or their charge of proving Russia collusion because Corsi has some connection with Assange, who may have had some connection with the Russians, who may have had some connection with releasing Podesta's phishing attack emails. I mean, if there's any integrity, if there's any honor anywhere in this investigation team of the special counsel, it can't be found. This is the deep state. This is the Washington establishment. This is everybody in that town still to this day ganging up, refusing to accept the election results of 2016 and searching in vain for even the slightest thing that could be said to be a crime that has some tangential connection to Russia so that Mueller and his team can say that their work was worth it. Or worse, trying to convince clueless Americans that what they've alleged for the last 2 years did happen, collusion between Trump and Russia. But in none of this, by the way, none of this, with Stone, with Corsi, with none of this, is Donald Trump even named? Is Donald Trump even mentioned? Is Donald Trump even referenced? So here's the question McCarthy got. I start first with Paul Manafort. Where does all this go based on what we're learning today?
I'm coming at this as somebody who has known and respected Bob Mueller and a number of the people on his staff who are very able lawyers. So I want to give this thing the benefit of the doubt. They were asked to look at, get to the bottom of what Russia did to interfere with the election, which is a worthy cause. But that's camouflage, it seems to me, for what has become a clown show. I mean, look. Let's assume that they got their big wish, right? Jerry Corsi has a contact in WikiLeaks, and he gets information from them. He gives it to Roger Stone, who gives it to President Trump. Let's assume all that happened, even though we don't have facts that establish that. It's not a crime.
It isn't a crime. It's also been learned, get this, things are not going Mueller's way in the real world. You'd never know this by paying attention to drive-by media, but something else has happened. It turns out that Manafort's lawyers have been talking to Trump's lawyers and keeping Trump's lawyers advised of what the special counsel's trying to do with Manafort. So now little pencil neck Adam Schiff is trying to say that's a crime. And he's going to investigate that. It isn't a crime. Lawyers can talk to each other. So basically, Manafort's lawyers have informed Trump they want my client to lie to them. They are trying to get Paul Manafort to indict you. They're trying to get him to admit things that he didn't do in order to go free or to have a lesser jail sentence. And the lawyers for Manafort have told Trump's lawyers that Manafort's not going to lie to him. There is no future in this. They are trying to accuse people of lying to them while at the same time asking them to lie, by committing to things that didn't happen, all so they can continue up the chain trying to get to Trump. Well, Trump's lawyers have been informed of this. And it's one of the reasons that Trump, I think, is so now tweeting with great confidence and courage and all this, because he knows what Manafort's lawyers have told him, and he knows, therefore, what Mueller's angle is here. And he knows that Mueller doesn't have anything if he's asking witnesses to lie and agree to scenarios the special counsel is creating. I mean, if you were Manafort, what would you do? They're asking you to lie while prosecuting you for lying. If you lie to them, even if they've asked you to, they can come back and later accuse you of lying to. This is an untenable situation and circumstance, and it's all rooted in the fact that they've got nothing. And I'm sorry if I sound mad about this, because I am. I am fit to be tied over it. This has been a hoax. It has been a travesty. From the very get-go, the very idea that fake, phony, fraudulent dossier is the reason for all of this frosts me to the degree that I've run out of words to express my anger. A made-up political opposition research document that contains not one element of truth was used to get FISA warrants to spy on the Trump campaign. It's why Manafort's going to jail. It's why Jerome Corsi's being threatened with going to jail, and Stone and all these ancillary players that had nothing to do with anything regarding the 2016 election. And there's nothing anybody can do to stop these people. You've got the rest of the drive-by media acting as cheerleaders for all of this. It is a travesty. It is an outrage. And all the while we're being told the people running this investigation have impeccable honor, impeccable integrity. The people we can trust of all people in Washington. What an absolute crock this is. Now, it'd be easy to sit here and let this stuff roll off my back and probably not make myself much of a target and just report it. But I'm sorry, the more I think about this, the more outraged I become. And it is abundantly clear they've got nothing. They don't have anything on anybody when they're asking witnesses to confirm scenarios that they, the prosecutors, are creating. I don't mean to be insulting of Corsi or Stone but my friends, these are not central players in the Trump administration, in the Trump campaign. They're not central players anywhere. Corsi is a journalist and an author, and Stone's a political activist, and he's been involved in campaigns, but he's former this, former that. I'm not casting judgment on either of these two. I'm pointing out the fact that it's no different than going after Minnie Mouse here, Mickey Mouse or whoever. It is beyond my ability to describe this. In fact, let me take a break here. There's one more Andy McCarthy bite. And a couple other points about this I want to make, and I need to compose myself here because I'm really ticked. I cannot describe.
This is the big one. Rush on the EIB network.
I don't care what they've got here. They do not have any collusion. Even if Corsi. Excuse me, even if Corsi and Stone make false statements, and I'm not saying they are, I'm giving the best case example for Mueller. Even if Corsi and Stone were to make false statements, they're ancillary. Try not to insult them, please. Don't misunderstand me. And even if there is some contact with Julian Assange in the middle of all this, and if there are emails going back and forth from all these different people, they still have no collusion. They've got nothing to do with the campaign, with the election. There's nothing here whatsoever. Here's the second Andy McCarthy bite. He continued after describing this investigation as a clown show and pointing out that none of what I've described to you even approaches being criminal.
So what are they doing here? They are investigating the seamy underbelly of politics, the fact that campaigns go out and try to get dirt on the opposition candidate, and they were asking a bunch of people who were involved in it, possibly, a bunch of uncomfortable questions, and they're getting them to lie about it, or else they are lying about it. But the point is, the underlying thing that they're investigating is politics. It's not crime. And it's not a prosecutor's place to do that.
Exactly, but that's exactly what it has become. We are politicizing and criminalizing politics here, particularly the politics of Donald Trump and his campaign. It's exactly right. You got some political operatives here at best, some fringe political operatives. Again, not trying to insult them. And you're investigating what these political operatives might have been doing. There's not a shred of evidence that either of them knows anybody named Vladimir or Boris or Natasha or anybody else that's Russian. Anyway, I'll try to calm down now. Back in a minute. Legend, a way of life. Rush Limbaugh. The Excellence in Broadcasting Network. Cindy Hyde-Smith won the runoff election in Mississippi last night by 8 points. You will not find this anywhere in the drive-by media. A white Republican woman won a runoff election for the United States Senate. If she were a Democrat, you would be hearing all about it. You'd be hearing about her race. You'd be hearing about her gender. You'd be hearing about how she skunked the other guy. But you can't find any news on this ever since the media last night figured out that she was going to win. And it was significant. It was 8 points. This means the Republicans now have 53 seats in the Senate. The Democrats have 47. Also, the situation at the border, illegal immigration, the president openly talking about his comfort with a government shutdown if we don't get the wall. Democrats are having a cow over this. Marco Rubio steps up and has the guts to tell everybody what this caravan movement is really all about. It was a giant test of the resolve of the United States and the Trump administration to hold firm on the border. There's no question that's what it was. The people doing the testing, international leftists all the way down to Honduras and Mexico, and American leftists joining together. There's no question that Rubio is right about this. We'll have details of all this and other things I have here yet to come as the program unfolds. I just want to go back to this Manafort business for 1 point. And I want to reiterate this. The point that we made yesterday. The news broke yesterday in the UK Guardian. Why the UK Guardian, by the way? Of all the newspapers to break this story in, why them? Well, it looks like they're the only ones that had the audacity to publish this crap. The story is that Paul Manafort went to meet and had visits with Julian Assange 3 separate times, and the last of the 3 times occurring when he was the campaign manager for the Trump campaign in 2016. From 2014 to 2016, Paul Manafort supposedly had secret meetings with Julian Assange. Others in the drive-by media have looked at the story. There have been some what are being called stealth edits on the part of the UK Guardian. They have changed the story, but have not indicated that they're changing it. They've changed pronouns. They've changed descriptives. These are called stealth edits. They're not admitting to having gotten anything wrong. They're just making changes as more and more of this caca is demonstrated to be just that, bunch of caca. And one of the reasons that this is caca is that we have learned that Manafort, long before he ever had anything to do with Trump, was under surveillance by the FBI and the DOJ because of his involvement with Ukraine, whether or not he had registered as a foreign agent and all of this. And the point about this is if he was under FBI surveillance since 2014, and again, it was about his lobbying efforts for Ukraine, former Ukrainian president, how in the world could he have had secret meetings with Assange or anybody else if he's under surveillance by the FBI? Why is this news? If Manafort under surveillance with the FBI since 2014 had 3 meetings with Assange, don't you think that would have been reported many, many years ago and long before now when Mueller is running out of options? Simply can't be. It simply, and Manafort and his lawyers are denying this in the strongest terms, and so is WikiLeaks. And WikiLeaks is offering $1 million to anybody who can prove that any of this ever happened. It's all just made up. I mean, it is classic fake news. So while he's being watched, while he's being surveilled, while he is being tracked, while he is being followed, Manafort met 3 different times with Julian Assange on Russian-related meetings. If that had happened, and then if this guy's been meeting with Assange, and then Trump hires him, I guarantee you we would have heard about it then. It didn't happen. And I just wanted to cement this again. I referenced this a little bit yesterday. And I wanted to cement this because it's just more and more of the misleading information. And here, what can Manafort do about it but deny it? You know, the whole of the drive-by media jumps on these things and reports them, and then everybody ends up believing that it happened. And by the way, this other situation where the Manafort lawyers decided to call Trump's lawyers and share with them the efforts of the Mueller team, it's not illegal. Have you ever heard of joint defense agreements? You have, right? Because you know lawyers, right? Joint defense agreement. So the defense lawyers for Manafort and the lawyers for Trump got together. And the Manafort lawyers shared with Trump's lawyers the techniques, the theories, the strategies, the attempts, the efforts of the Mueller investigators. Not illegal at all. It's very smart. Adam Schiff, little pencil neck from California in the House Investigation Committee, now wants to investigate this. He has no business investigating this. He has nothing to say about it. Congress has no oversight or purview over lawyer teams getting together under joint defense agreements. Yeah, it all does. It's gone on like this for 2 years, and they're getting away with it, is what ticks me off. They're getting away. The only way to fight this is to flood the zone, meaning the American people, with the truth and some factual information about this. But what really galls me is that we keep hearing and have always heard about the integrity of Robert Mueller. You must be very careful criticizing Robert Mueller. Robert Mueller has served as the director of the FBI. He served presidents of both parties. He's perfectly nonpartisan. Blah, 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 blah. Open our mouths and let them shovel it all in. And we happily chew away, and it's all a crock. If there were any integrity, and I mean this from the bottom of my sizable and beating in rhythm heart, if there were any integrity in this investigative team, they would have shut this thing down a month after they learned what has never happened, and they would have shifted their direction toward the Democrats and the Hillary campaign and all of the fraud that existed in taking a phony document to the FISA court to get warrants to spy on innocent people while the FBI planted spies in the Trump campaign. People with integrity, the kind of integrity we're told Mueller has in abundance, would have immediately seen what's gone on and brought a stop to all this. But no, that's not what happened. It's very clear what this is. This is the Washington establishment, the elites, the deep state, whatever you want to call it, remaining focused and using every ounce of federal power they can amass to continue their efforts to overturn the results of the election of 2016 and to destroy anybody they can who had anything to do with Trump winning. We'll be back after this.
America's.
A little bit of change of course here for just a brief moment. Last night here in Palm Beach, Florida, they lit up the Christmas tree, the official Palm Beach Christmas tree on Worth Avenue. And the local media showed up for this great festive occasion. And here is how it sounded. Mike Lyons from WPBF TV, Eyeball, I think 5 News. Are they Channel 5 or 25? 25. That's right. Anyway, here is how it sounded.
That looks fantastic. That is a 40-foot Christmas tree donated by Palm Beach resident Rush Limbaugh. Hundreds of people here on Worth Avenue having just a great time as we kick off the holiday season here on Palm Beach. We had a big parade a short time ago led by the Salvation Army Band and Santa Claus. He arrived on a Lamborghini. Weather is great. It's a festive night. Have a happy holiday.
Santa Claus arrived on a Lamborghini is what I wanted you to hear in that report from Mike Lyons, Eyeball News, WPBF TV here. Santa Claus shows up in a Lamborghini. Okay, let's get started on the phones. Rockport, Maine. This is Kim. You're up first today. Great to have you with us. Hello.
Rush, 1992, Rush Room Dittos.
Thank you, sir.
Pleasure to talk to you. I have an idea. I'd love your comment. What if acting AG Whitaker calls in, let's say, 3 or 4 Joe DeGeneres, who I admire, and he commissions them with a investigation of the fake, phony FISA situation. And he's going to go after Strzok, Brennan, Comey, Clinton, and he tells them, give me a budget, tell me what you need. And then, miraculously, this leaks. The left goes ballistic, and in those smoky, dark back rooms, there's a deal made. Mueller goes away. I hate to give up.
Okay, well, let me wait a minute. I don't like to play these what if games. What should happen? What if somebody did this and did? There's no. Let me ask you, why do you think this hasn't been done?
I'm not sure. I don't understand. You've explained many times why you think Trump is letting this play out, and I agree. There's political advantage, but it hasn't showed up yet. It hasn't been profitable. So why not put on the pressure? It's clearly within his purview.
Yeah, but he's not even declassifying the documents that the allies, Donald Trump has had lots of allies on Capitol Hill who have begged him to declassify all of the documents having to do with the beginning of the investigation of his campaign. Do you know we still don't know when that really was? They've lied to us about that. They tried telling us that the investigation began when George Papadopoulos, who's now serving a 2-week sentence for lying to our precious prosecutor, Bob Mueller, and his band of thieves. Let me retract the word thieves. His band of investigators. 2 weeks. And he didn't lie to anybody. This is the point. And Papadopoulos was a nobody. Trump never even knew him. During the Trump campaign, when it looks like Trump's campaign's getting serious, might actually win the nomination, then does, the media says, well, who are your foreign policy advisors? And Trump says, I don't need any. I know what I think about the world. Media says, you got to have advisors. And the Republican Party says, you got to have advisors. So Trump's, okay, well, go put some bodies out there and name them. And Papadopoulos happened to be one. You know Trump from Shinola. So the investigators, McCabe, Strzok, Smirk, who's really the ringleader of this, gets hold of a couple of spies they're using from Cambridge, and Malta, Joseph Mifsud, the Maltese professor, and Stefan Halper from Oxford and Cambridge. And they call Papadopoulos, say, man, we love the work you're doing, buddy. We want to give you a $3,000 award and a trip over here to the UK to give a lecture at some highfalutin think tank. Stefanov says, wow, or Papadopoulos, wow, this is cool. So Papadopoulos shows up. While he's in the UK, Stefan Halper and Mifsud tell him that they've heard that the Russians have 30,000 Hillary emails. Papadopoulos says, whoa, this is really big. I'm becoming a player. Then they set him up to have adult beverages with the ambassador from Australia. And at the bar, before going to the bar, Stefan Halper reminds Papadopoulos, now remember, George, about those emails that the Russians have of Hillary's. Oh, yeah. So while having adult beverages with the Australian ambassador, Papadopoulos happens to start bragging. He thinks he's an insider. Yeah, you know, the Russians have a whole lot of Hillary's emails. Well, the ambassador of Australia is in on the ruse. So when he hears this, he calls Smirk. You know what he says? Hey, there's some guy here from the Trump campaign, foreign policy advisor, says the Russians have 30,000 Hillary emails. I'm not making a word of this up. And then they said, my God, the Trump campaign's bragging about the fact that Russians have Hillary emails, when this guy Papadopoulos knew nothing until the FBI's spies and plants told him. Well, they tried to tell us that that was the official beginning of the investigation. And that was sometime in 2006. It wasn't. They had spies embedded in the Trump campaign long before Papadopoulos. Anyway, Trump could tell us. Trump could declassify all of these documents that would explain when McCabe and Strzok, Smirk, and Page and Comey and whoever else really thought to begin the process to undermine the Trump campaign, and then to undermine the Trump transition, and then to undermine the Trump presidency. It is ongoing to this day. He won't do it. The reason is, supposedly, our UK allies, Stefan Halper and Mifsud and all these others complicit, have said it would be really, really dangerous and risky for our allied relationship. I don't think Trump wants to declassify this stuff because, as I have posited, I think Trump has calculated that there is political benefit to being seen as a victim in all of this, the victim of the campaign to discredit him, the target of this illegal investigation and so forth. And there could be other reasons why he doesn't want to declassify it. Now, why there hasn't been an investigation into Hillary Clinton, and folks, if I knew that, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing. I'd be president. I don't know. I hired Joe DeGeneres. Look, Fox News is not going to be the answer to this, okay? The problem that we have is that too much of official Washington, Republicans included, are part of the group that want Trump gone. And don't think he doesn't know it. What all we need, another investigation that could go anywhere it wants to go? I don't know, folks. I don't know. Back in just a second. Most listened to radio talk show in America. And I am your host, a household name in all four corners of the world. Our telephone number, if you want to join us, 800-282-2882, and the email address, lrushmo@eibnet.us. Okay, so yesterday, the former President Barack Hussein Obama, who is just, this is pathetic. It is pathetic. Barack Obama, wherever he goes, is trying to claim credit for all of the good that is happening primarily in the U.S. economy. But wherever it is, Obama is asking people, I want you to remember where it started and who to thank. That's right. I want you to say thank you. He's saying this stuff to people. The degree to which we are threatened, that may be too strong a word, but I'll stick with it. The degree to which we are having to deal with people who are not psychologically secure, and by that I mean the majority of the American left, it's frightening. So there is at Rice University a new political institute. It's the James A. Baker Political Institute. The James A. Baker, who was Secretary of State for George H.W. Bush. He's from the Bush branch of the Republican Party. Rice University is in Houston. So he's got this Baker think tank there. And they had Obama. That makes sense, doesn't it? The Bush wing of the Republican Party inviting former President Barack Hussein to come down and basically rip the current Republican president at the James A. Baker Political Institute at Rice University. And Obama, talk about suddenly America is the largest oil producer. Well, that was me, people. Say thank you. He said this. That was me. That was you. You tried to shut down oil production everywhere you could. You wouldn't authorize pipelines. You're building stupid windmills and solar panels everywhere. What do you mean the oil boom is you? Look, folks, I'm going to have to consciously dial it down here because I don't know how it sounds with me being this mad or agitated or whatever. The last thing I want to do is upset any of you. But some of this stuff, you deal with this garbage every day. You refute it every day. You disprove these people every day, and they still keep lying to people. And then the drive-by media is out there promoting and selling all of this BS at the same time. So here's some more detail. We got some audio of this, so stand by. At the, let's see, this is the actual, what's the name of this place? The James A. Baker. Actually, James A. Baker did some of the interviewing of Obama, too, along with John Meekum, who used to run Newsweek. Without mentioning President Trump, former President Obama praised his own administration, which is indictment-free, during an invitation-only gala in Houston. Obama's remarks came at the tail end of an hour-long interview with former Secretary of State James A. Baker III during the 25th anniversary celebration of the nonpartisan Baker Institute for Public Policy at Rice University. Obama said, not only did I not get indicted, nobody in my administration got indicted. By the way, it was the only administration in modern history that can be said about. In fact, nobody came close to being indicted, probably because the people who joined us were there for the right reasons. A nonpartisan Republican think tank sponsored this. Now, this infuriates me more than I can say, but I'm going to maintain my composure here. Because the fact of the matter is that this man, Barack Hussein Obama, was a walking scandal by virtue of his leftist transformational policies to begin with. No scandals? How about you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor. You like your plan, you can keep your plan. My plan's going to lower your premium, $2,500 a year. I think Barack Obama oversaw some of the greatest scandals in our country. The politicization and the weaponization of the IRS. Hello, Lois Lerner. The weaponization, the politicization of the DOJ, the FBI, the CIA, the DNI, and everything to do with this investigation into Trump. You talk about corruption? The whole FBI, the leadership during Obama's era was corrupt. Our intelligence agencies were in on this. FISA courts might even be involved in it. And his Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, was allowed to create and maintain an illegal, hidden email server that facilitated the criminal exposure and mishandling of thousands of classified documents and allowed her to have a pay-for-play scheme with foreign donors to the Clinton Foundation off the record so that none of it was on government computer servers. And by the way, have you seen what happened to donations to the Clinton Foundation since she lost? They're like down 90% because there's no reason to pay, because there won't be any play. Since Hillary's not in the White House, there's no reason to pay to try to influence her thinking. Clinton Foundation donations have practically come to an end, a screeching halt. Now the Clintons can't even fill arenas as they go out and try to prove that they are just as popular as Donald Trump. Obama can run around and talk about, nope, nobody, my team was in that. I wanted. That's because nobody had the guts to investigate. Nobody had the guts to criticize this administration. Obama had a boundary around him that never was going to be permeated. It wasn't even going to be approached. It's called race. This permitted the media to act like Obama was a straight arrow and a moderate mainstream guy with the sharpest crease in his slacks any president had ever had. No accountability, constant platitudes, slobbering, fawning, favorable coverage. And now they get to hear about Obama talk about his scandal-free presidency with zero pushback. We don't even talk about what happened in Benghazi, and if you do, you're the problem. So now let's go to the... Is there one more to this? No, he did say about the oil that he was responsible for the boom. Suddenly, America's the largest oil producer. That was me. People say thank you. So let's go to the audio sound bites. This is not where he's being interviewed by James A. Baker III. This is, and it was last night, Rice University. This is history professor and former Newsweek editor John Meacham, or Meacham, I'm not sure how he pronounces it, interviewing Obama. And here's the first bite of their discussion.
Members of Congress now are entirely secure that they'll win their seat if they get the nomination. What they've got to worry about is, do I have somebody from farther to my right or farther to my left who's going to run against me in a primary? They then are not willing to stray from whatever the party line has become. You've got folks like Limbaugh and others who are enforcing what they consider to be ideological purity of some sort. What you had by the time I arrive is a Congress that has difficulty getting out of campaign mode and into governance mode.
For crying out loud. I don't know where to start with. This guy never left campaign mode. It led to me creating the Limbaugh theorem to explain how he never left the campaign mode. Obama was masterful. As he was doing all these transformational things which were damaging the U.S. economy and overturning the healthcare system, he acted like he had nothing to do with it. He acted like he was up against these powerful forces like me and others. And it was incredible to watch. The media really helped him get away with this. He was president, but he was powerless. He was powerless to stop all of these things. You may have forgotten it. The first 2 weeks of Obama's regime, he calls up all the leaders of Congress, House and Senate, Republican and Democrat. And at the end of the meeting, or near the end of the meeting, he looks at John Boehner, who at the time was the Republican speaker, and told Boehner and the rest of the Republicans that they got to stop listening to Rush Limbaugh. That's just not how things are going to get done here now. Now, that was reported, not widely. I had a meeting with Boehner right here 2 weeks later, and he was telling me about it. And he said he was really confused. He didn't know why Obama had said that. I kind of cocked my head. I said, you don't? You don't know why he said that to you? No, I can't figure what was the point? I said, what he was hoping for was that just one of you would go to that bunch of microphones outside the West Wing after the meeting and agree with him. The guys like Rush Limbaugh are the problem. He thought he could cow a bunch of you into thinking he's this brand new arriving moderate and wants to get rid of politics as usual and forge a new course. And he was hoping you would come back. He'd already had dinner with George Will and a bunch of others, And he had tried to name now never Trumpers as the heartbeat of conservatism by having dinner with him. And he was trying, Mr. Boehner, for you to come out and speak out against talk radio and the conservative blogosphere. And Boehner said, I didn't think it. I never thought. I just couldn't figure out why he was doing it. Because Boehner's probably said, we don't listen to you anyway, so what's he talking about? But anyway, it happened. Now, here's more from Obama. Well, let's just listen. I don't need to characterize it.
I still feel bad for Charlie Crist down in Florida, the governor, hugely popular, but hadn't gotten the memo that he wasn't supposed to cooperate with me. I think the fact that I kind of gave him a little bro hug, that was it. I mean, I felt bad for the guy because he became a cause célèbre inside of the Republican media or the Limbaugh Fox News media world, which is how Marco Rubio got elected, essentially was saying you are not a true believer.
This guy's been out of office for 2 years. He was in office for 8 years. And some reason I'm still there living rent-free in his brain. And he's using me as, I don't know, his excuse or whatever. I think what it is, I think it was my Wall Street Journal editorial of 4 words shortly after he'd been immaculated. They asked me for 400. I said, I don't need 400. I can do it in 4. I hope he fails. And I don't think they have ever gotten over that. And they knew what I meant, even though they continued to mischaracterize it as me saying, I hope the country failed. It was the exact opposite. So this was at the James A. Baker Nonpartisan Political Institute for Politics at Rice University. Let's see. We've got some flashbacks just to illustrate that this isn't new for Obama. January 13th, 2017, NBC's Dateline, Lester Holt said to Obama, given that the recovery was as uneven as it was, with the people on the bottom slower to recover than people on the top, didn't that in some way plant the seeds for the election of Donald Trump?
Well, what is true is that the ability of Republican leaders to rile up their base, helped along by folks like Rush Limbaugh and some commentators on Fox News, I think created an environment in which Republican voters would punish Republicans for cooperating with me. That hothouse of back and forth argument and really sharp partisanship, I think has been harmful to the country.
What do you notice about this? You notice that none of what he or the left or the Democrats do is partisan. No, it's just normal. It's just what is. It's the natural order of things. And any opponents, anybody that opposes them, are radical or are partisan, rigid ideologues. As ideological as I am, I can't compare to Barack Obama. I can't compare, and nor can anybody I know on the right compare to the rigid ideological structure and belief system of Barack Obama, who comes from the genealogical tree of Saul Alinsky and the Communist Party. And yet I am considered to be this strident, ideologically pure, unwavering obstacle. And all I am is a guy on the radio. I never had a vote against him. I never had a say in what happened with healthcare or Benghazi or anything else. There's not a thing I could do to stop, to impede, or to help the Obama agenda. What this really is, there were a lot of Republicans afraid to oppose him, folks, because of race. Just didn't want to be called racists, bigots, scared to death. And believe me, the Democrats made as much of that as they could. They knew that there were boundaries around Obama that nobody would get close to. But to us here, they didn't exist because he wasn't black, he wasn't male, he was president of the United States, whose ideas mattered and with whom we disagreed. I got past the historical racial component of this after the inauguration. After that, The idea that you can't criticize the president, and they parlayed this like you can't believe. That's why they want the first female president. Can't criticize her, be sexist. Then they want the first Hispanic president. Can't criticize him, be racist and bigoted all over again. It's what these people do. Try to shut down, stifle, and end any opposing speech that they don't want to hear.
Living inside liberals' head.
So Barack Obama says that he's responsible for the oil boom. Somebody tell me what Obama did to support the fossil fuel industry. Was it when he promised to shut down the coal industry in America? Was it all of his massive regulations? Remember, he wanted to drive up the price of electricity generated by coal so that coal mines would have to be shut down. And do we remember Barack Hussein Obama running around along with the rest of his party? We can't drill our way out of this. We just can't do it. We can't drill our way out. And that was a response to Sarah Palin. You know, she was out there saying, drill, baby, drill. And that shook the Democrats up. We can't drill our way out of it. Now Obama's taking credit for this, trying to shut down fracking, which is the latest innovation to extract oil from places nobody even knew it was. Here is Dave in Monument, Colorado. Great to have you, sir. Glad you called. Hi.
It's such an honor. You are such a great American. I'll get right to my point. I'm as frustrated as you are with this lack of doing anything in the government. We were told we needed the House. We were told we needed the Senate. We were told we needed the president. We've got it. Rhino Ryan has done nothing but block this great president for 2 years. You know, the Democrats, the communists, were able to get Obamacare passed in a lame duck session. And here we have all three branches of government, and we can't fund the border wall. We can't defund Planned Parenthood. We can't get judges through. We can't get anything done. We can't even get an investigation into all of the treasonous activities that happened under the Obama administration. So my question is, how long do we have to wait?
Yeah, I know. The problem, as you lay it out, is the Republican Party isn't unified. We've got rhinos like McCain, Corker, Flake, and others that just are, to this day, still opposed to Trump and don't want him to succeed. Okay, folks, this is it. This is the last day of a very special promo that we're doing for the Rush Limbaugh store at rushlimbaugh.com, or the EIB store. This is our revamped, restocked merchandise store. We've stocked it now with special items for the holiday season. We have a special handmade Christmas tree ornament that we make every year and make available. This year is no different. We have special additions that make great, great Christmas presents, Christmas gifts. It's wintertime in a lot of the country. We have long sleeve apparel that we've added for both men and women, and it's by popular demand. You know, we had the EIB store languishing there for a number of years because, frankly, folks, have been honest with you. I don't like saying, go to my site, buy this, buy that. I've often felt queasy about it, but we started getting requests from people to update the merchandise. The shirts and the caps in there had been in there for years, and they hadn't been updated, and that was my fault. I had not wanted it updated. But then the public and popular demand set in, and we decided that if we're going to do it, that we're going to do it top flight and top drawer. So the whole thing has been redesigned. It has been re-engineered. You're going to find one of the smoothest, most efficient, and best customer service operations in all of online commerce at the EIB store at rushlimbaugh.com. Now, we've got this special promo that we're running here that ends by 11:59 p.m. tonight. All you have to do is shop. All you have to do to be entered is shop. And here is what can be won. Somebody's going to win this. A 4-day, 3-night trip to Palm Beach, Florida in a 5-star resort or equivalent. You are going to pick the date. We're not going to tell you you have to come in the middle of hurricane season when the hotels are closed. We're not going to tell you that you have to come during the cheap.
People are getting really fed up, and they're feeling that something's not right because these we all know the circuit court judges in California are super leftists, right?
Right.
But he's the president of the United States. Let them sue him. Let them sue him. They're not going to have standing. Most of the border is with Texas, and isn't 90% of the border between Texas and Mexico private-owned lands? What the heck are they going to sue? I mean, private owners can do whatever they want. I mean, the wall alone won't do it. But if you put a 3-4-prong approach, it's going to stem it.
Well, I mean, there's an interesting little story I have in the stack today. There is a portion of a new wall that exists, I think, the California-Mexico border. And the story is that this new wall is actually impossible for the invaders to get over. In other words, it's working. It's just a small portion, almost like a prototype, but it has been deployed. Look, I appreciate the call. I think there's something going on out there. She is a Trump supporter. She's talking to other Trump supporters, and it's understandable there would be some, I don't know what, trepidation. It's been 2 years. There isn't a wall, and now we're talking about shutting down the government in order to get a wall built. We all know that most Republicans don't want a wall. We know that no Democrats want a wall. We know that that hasn't changed. We know that the president does not have a unified party behind him on any of this. And yet it is seen by people who elected him that shouldn't stop him. That he uniquely, and that's why he was elected, has the ability to get this done, even withstanding this opposition that he faces. And I understand the concern, because this is why he was elected, and people really did believe that he was going to do something about it. I'll tell the pressure that is being exerted on the public is intense. For example, you remember yesterday had a story from Breitbart that featured projections based on current data. And it said that if current levels of illegal immigration continue, that next year, 600,000 illegals will succeed in crossing the border and getting into the country and not be deported. It's been, I think, 2007 since we had a number that high, was 705,000. Now, that story came from Breitbart, which journalistically is a Trump ally. And last night, I'm working, doing show prep, and I come across a Pew Center for People of Press study, which says that illegal immigration is plummeting, that the numbers of people succeeding in crossing the border illegally is really, really dwindling. And I said, wait a minute. These both cannot be true. On the one hand, if we don't do anything, next year's number is going to be 600,000 illegals, and add to that number everybody they can eventually bring with them via chain migration and the like, anchor babies and the kids they will be birthing after they get here. So that 600,000 number is actually far more than that in ensuing years. And then Pew comes out with the story the next day, the same day, just later in the day. No. Illegal immigration is dwindling. Now, so I look at these two and I say, which of these two happens to be true? Because they both can't be. And I have to conclude that the Pew Center numbers, much as I wish this wasn't the case, I wish the Pew numbers were right. I wish illegal immigration was plummeting. I wish that the numbers of people willingly trying to break the law were plummeting and declining. I just don't think it's the case. And I think that Pew and CNN and ABC, CBS, NBC, they're all part of the drive-by media cabal. I think they are trying to pressure people into believing a wall isn't necessary. Look it, we don't need to build a wall. Illegal immigration is really declining. We know they don't want a wall. We know the left doesn't want the wall. We know the Democrats don't want a wall. We know half the Republicans don't want a wall. because they want illegal immigration. Democrat Party feeds off of it. Democrat Party needs it for their permanent underclass. So I'm saying if you see news how illegal immigration is really, really plummeting, it's going to be tempting to believe it, to give Trump credit, because everybody wants to give Trump credit where it's deserved and earned. But what you're supposed to conclude, if you agree that illegal immigration is declining, hey, maybe we don't need a wall. Yeah, maybe. I'm telling you, the last thing the Washington establishment wants is a wall. The Democrat Party doesn't want it. Robert Mueller doesn't want a wall. Andrew McCabe doesn't want a wall. Peter Strzok don't want a wall. Lisa Page doesn't want a wall. James Comey doesn't want there to be a wall. The spies in the Trump campaign, Stefan Halper doesn't want a wall, and neither does Joseph Mifsud. None of the people you know want a wall. And they're going to do everything they can to convince you that it isn't necessary, even if they have to make it look like Trump is succeeding in reducing the numbers. Back in a second.
The center of the radio.
Your guiding light, Rush Limbaugh, America's real anchorman, truth detector, and doctor of democracy. And here's Kevin in College Station, Texas. Glad you waited, sir. Hi.
Hey, Rush, I'm a sixth-generation Texan, and I want a wall. Hey, you are, it's an honor to speak to you. You are a modern-day founding father. One day your face ought to be on Mount Rushmore. My comment about the president, I think that President Trump is from a different generation. He's not infected with the need for instant gratification. And when I look at his strategy with the Mueller investigation, I think he's willing to endure the pain to have an issue a year from now when I think he dynamites the levee and starts draining the swamp, and he uses this and a lot of other things to frame his reelection.
You know, I understand the thinking. I heard that theorem used to explain how Trump was waiting to reveal similar kind of information for the midterms, that Trump was withholding a lot of action and prolonging a lot of things so that he could have a massive solution either implemented or beginning right before the midterm elections. But it didn't happen. Now, you think Trump wants the Mueller investigation to keep going and going so that it's close enough to the 2020 election that it benefits Trump's reelection effort?
Yeah, I think he knows there's no there, and he's not afraid of it. And he is getting an awful lot done. I think people make the mistake of assuming that he's not getting things done. He's getting an awful lot done. But I think he knows legislatively there's a lot of people that he's got to get out of the way, like some former senators and some other folks that have to be taken care of one way or another electorally before he can move his legislative priorities forward.
Yeah, but see, when you look at it that way, the Senate, come January, most of the never-Trumpers there, not all, but some of the most vocal never-Trumpers are going to be gone. McCain is already gone. Corker will be gone. And so will Jeff Flake. Now, those two guys, Flake, especially Flake today, he's out there, yelling and screaming about the need for legislation in the Senate to protect the Mueller investigation. And Mitch McConnell is telling these people to go pound sand. They made a proposal on the floor of the Senate for legislation. All it takes is one objection to shut it down. McConnell objected. But these are never Trumper types. They despise Trump. They hate him. And they want Mueller to have something. And so they're scared to death that Trump is going to fire Mueller, and they know that nobody can do anything about it if he does. Your theory is he's not going to fire Mueller. He wants Mueller to keep bumbling around out there like Inspector Clouseau. I have to think about that. Your theory is not an instant gratification. He's a long-term thinker, but he's now got a Democrat House. There's no Trump legislation going to see the light of day. None that we want, anyway, with that circumstance. Back in a second, folks. President Trump is threatening auto manufacturers with the loss of federal subsidies over these electric vehicles that nobody wants. Well, sorry if you do, but most people don't. Anyway, back in a minute. Canceling it after 13 weeks. It was only a 13-week order. So we're just not renewing. We're not canceling anything. That's their story, and they're sticking to it. But you know as well as I do that if Murphy Brown had been a hit, that they'd be trying to do another Roseanne version of it, except not get rid of Candace Bergen. So another We Hate Trump comedy down the tubes. Murphy Brown, and they've canceled another show, Happy Together. Anybody know what that show is? Supposedly comedy, Happy Together. As long as they don't cancel Elementary. If they hold on, even if they put Elementary on All Access, that's such a great show. I love Elementary. And it almost got canceled last year, but it survived. Greetings and welcome back. It's the EIB Network. Rush Limbaugh behind the golden EIB microphone, and the telephone number is 800-282-2882. Email address lrushbo@eibnet.us. Okay, let's move on to the subsidies for electronic vehicles story here. I have to tell folks, I am so happy that Trump has woken up or awakened, whatever, to this gigantic wealth transfer known as electric car subsidies. Now, I need to say something at the outset here. I am not opposed. If you like electric cars, that's fine. If you want to go buy one, that's fine. I'm all for freedom of choice. If you want to think that you're saving the environment, you go right ahead. I'll try to talk you out of it. But if you want to drive one of these things, have at it. I'm not going to castigate you. I'm not going to make fun of you. I'm not going to mock you, except if you think you're somehow saving something by doing so. This is the most asinine, ridiculous thing that if it's yet another illustration of the lack of critical thinking. Why electric cars? Because it saves the environment, because it doesn't burn fossil fuels. Really? What's in it? Batteries, Mr. Limbaugh, batteries. And you know, there's no fossil fuels in batteries, Mr. Limbaugh. You drive up and you connect a big hose and it charges them. Electricity from giant source to the battery in the car. I said, yeah, right. Okay. So the people charging that battery before you pull up to the charging station, where does the electricity that's in the battery that ends up in your car, where does that come from? Well, another battery, Mr. No. It's coming from coal-powered, fossil fuel-powered power plants. There's not a single savings of fossil fuel. You still have to charge a battery. And those are done via electricity. And electricity is not generated by battery. It's generated by fossil fuel-powered power plants. Coal-fired power plants, to be specific. The more electric cars out there, the more coal that is being used. And yet, people believe that they are eliminating the burning of fossil fuels by buying electric cars. Fine. If you're free to think that, you're free to be ignorant about it. That's fine with me. Where I draw the line in this is where we as taxpayers are told that we have to subsidize this because we are destroying the climate. We are destroying the planet, and these new vehicles are the only way to save the planet. And so we're going to start subsidizing these things left and right. And this all got started over the recent discussion, General Motors closing 5 plants. Trump getting very mad at them for doing this. He really tweeted out some caustic criticism of the CEO of GM, Mary Barra, and suggested that maybe she want to close a plant or two in China instead of a factory here in Detroit, Amtrak, Michigan. Well, why is General Motors in this problem or whatever? That's very simple. Barack Hussein Obama, who today is trying to make everybody think that the United States' new #1 ranking as an oil nation is because of him. I did that. I'm the one that was responsible for all of the new drilling. No, Mr. President, you wouldn't open a single pipeline. You made fun of people who said, just drill, baby, drill. You said, drill, baby, drill's not the answer. You were pushing all these alternative energy forms. You were trying to eliminate the use of fossil fuels and oil, or at least make people think you were. So what happened was that during the Obama administration, with his all-out assault on coal, and he warned everybody he's going to make coal so expensive that you could not make a profit in the business. If he succeeded, the coal business would be shut down, and he gave it his best shot. And Trump reviving it is another reason why Trump got elected. So with Obama working his magic, the price of gasoline was skyrocketing and the price of oil was skyrocketing. And as the price of gasoline goes up, people change buying habits, they change driving habits. And exactly as the electric car lobby wanted, as the price of gasoline goes up, then the PR push for electric vehicles ramps up, and people are told that they can escape the high price of gasoline and the scarcity of oil. Oh, yeah, we're going to run out soon, you know, because there aren't any more dinosaur fossils left to be discovered. So people start deciding, yeah, okay, well, I'll go out and buy an electric vehicle. Then Trump gets elected. Changes the focus on everything, puts the focus back on fracking, the focus back on development and refining of oil. We have more than we know what to do with. We've got more natural gas than we know what to do with. We are swimming in brand new discoveries of fossil fuels. We rival Saudi Arabia. Price of gasoline's come down. Electric cars are less and less attractive. Problem is, General Motors decided that Obama was the future and retooled everything for a high price of gasoline per gallon, and they ramped up their electric vehicle unit, and he even got a promise of Obama to buy a Chevy Volt when he left office. He hasn't bought one yet, folks. He promised. He did promise to buy a Chevy Volt. He didn't buy one when he was president because the Secret Service wouldn't let him drive. But now he can drive, so he's going to go get one. But he didn't. And now they've shut down manufacture of the Volt. And they're having to close factories largely because of their decision to go electric in so big a percentage of their fleet. Meanwhile, Ford decided to go all in on SUVs and trucks, the famous Ford F-150. They're just going gangbusters. So General Motors is closing down plants, or saying they're going to, and Donald Trump has decided to hold over their heads the subsidies they were getting to build electric cars. Do you know, folks, you don't may not know this, Elon Musk has had subsidies for Tesla in the billions of dollars. I'm not arguing whether he's a genius or not, or whether he's a smart guy, an entrepreneur, any of that. I'm just saying that if it hadn't been for subsidies, i.e., basically people paying him money that he could not earn from selling cars, then there wouldn't be a Tesla. Now, the subsidies that General Motors got in no way approach the subsidies that Elon Musk got. But the headline of the story here is Trump targets General Motors subsidies. The fallout is real for General Motors, which revealed plans to cut 14,000 jobs and close manufacturing plants in the U.S. earlier this week. After the announcement, President Trump said he told General Motors it's playing around with the wrong person, meaning him. And then he tweeted, very disappointed with General Motors and their CEO, Mary Barra, for closing plants in Ohio, Michigan, and Maryland. Nothing being closed in Mexico and China. The U.S. saved General Motors, and this is the thanks we get? We're now looking at cutting all GM subsidies, including for electric cars. General Motors made a big Chicom bet years ago when they built plants there and in Mexico. Don't think that bet's going to pay off. I'm here to protect America's workers. Now, if, and it's a big if Trump's threat to cut electric vehicle subsidies could spell trouble for GM, if it happens, and that's because, you ready for the news here? As of right now, customers who buy fully electric vehicles like the Chevy Bolt are eligible for a federal tax credit of $7,500 toward the vehicle. But that credit begins to phase out after an automaker sells 200,000 eligible electric cars. Now, Tesla already hit that 200,000 mark. General Motors was less than 4,000 vehicles away from the cap as of the third quarter of this year. We're still talking a paltry number, and you realize that all of this is politics? Without subsidies, there wouldn't have been electric cars in the first place because nobody wants them yet. But if you're going to offer people a $7,500 subsidy or cash back for going out and buying one, you're going to get some takers. But 200,000 vehicles compared to the amount of cars and trucks sold every year in America, that's not, you could put them in a thimble. It's nowhere near the definition of a successful business. But the manufacturers need those subsidies because electric cars, contrary, they're not cheaper. And they're a lot more inconvenient. Again, I don't want anybody, I understand a lot of you love them. A lot of you are into them. A lot of you love the fact that they're quiet and that they're cool and you think they're technologically innovative and all that. That's fine. Please do not misunderstand me here. I'm not ripping anybody for buying one because I believe in freedom, liberty, pursuit of happiness, and if that's what makes you happy, fine and dandy. What I draw the line at is being told, being lied to that these things are overwhelmingly popular when they're not. We have to subsidize them. And then you bring in the whole climate change aspect of this, which cannot be denied. And now we enter fraudulent hoax territory. Yeah, there's PR to be gained. Yeah, I'm saving the environment. I'm manufacturing and selling electric cars. But there's no saving the environment. You cannot have an electric car and you can't charge the damn thing without using a hell of a lot of coal or oil or natural gas. You know how many people don't know that? You'd be stunned, particularly in the millennial population, who have no idea that there is any coal used at all in using a product that has a battery that has to be charged. They don't even think about it. They're never told. They're just told it's like magic. It's clean. There's no pollution. There's no exhaust. There's no filth. Any of that. It's really, really, really clean. Well, maybe, but in order to get that battery in your car fully charged, you got to burn a lot of coal. Or a lot of oil. Anyway, the president is threatening these subsidies, and I'm glad that he is. It's about time somebody has the gonads to use these as leverage. But it's one thing to talk about it. Let's see if he and the GOP will do something about it. I think they need to get rid of all these big subsidy suckers, not just GM, but anybody else who's getting a federal subsidy on basically a political idea or objective. Because there's nothing. It's just like windmills. I mean, you think you can build an airplane, a jet airplane, that can get off the ground that does not use fossil fuels. You think you can come up with a cargo truck. Yes, Rush, Tesla has one. Yeah, Tesla's truck looks pretty cool. And man, does it really go 60 miles and then you got to stop and charge that sucker. Or maybe 100 or what have you. Anyway, let me take a brief time out. We'll continue right after this with much more on the EIB network. Yeah, glad you reminded me. I think General Motors deciding to close these plants is purely political. I think it's designed to hurt Trump politically. I don't think there's any question about it. None whatsoever. Which I think is really a raw deal because Trump is trying to help these companies out. If they really cared about the environment, they wouldn't be building their cars down in Mexico or in China in the first place. Trump is doing as much as he can to make it easier for U.S. car companies to sell cars in China. He's working hard on that. Then they come along and do this. He sees it for what it is. It's purely political. By the way, I forgot to mention something, a little bitty add-on here. Some of you who shop at the new Rush Limbaugh store, EIB store at rushlimbaugh.com, you're going to get items in there autographed by me because I have been going up and helping fulfill some of the orders. I have to oversee the operation. I have to go up there and I have to make sure that the systems are working. I'm thinking about videoing and showing you how this works because we've got this down to such the fulfillment. You would not believe how cool this is. The way the orders come in, we go to the places on the rack, we scan them 3 or 4 times, get them in the right places, make sure they go to the right box, then to the right bin to go to the right place in the post office. It is a masterful operation, and it happens lightning fast because we got orders coming in left and right. Anyway, I stop and sign some of the stuff. Not the actual merchandise. I sign a card to throw it in there or maybe include an autographed picture. So some of you lucky customers are going to get autographed stuff from me and if that happens, you'll know that I fulfilled or helped fulfill your order. In the meantime, back to the phones. This is Tim in San Antonio. It's great to have you with us, Tim. Hi.
Fastest 3 decades in dittos, Rush.
Thank you, sir.
The problem with our battle against the global warming people is that we're trying to wage this battle on the scientific front. They kind of have that sewn up. I don't think we're going to make much headway there. But if we look at it economically, what they're saying is that the destruction of the environment is going to end up in the deaths of millions of people over a period of time. And what they would have us believe is if we reverse all of this and we stop using, fossil fuels and so on, that the environment will survive and all these people will survive. The problem is that when you remove the fossil fuels from the equation, you remove the majority of the support for the 7.5 billion people that live on the planet. Without fossil fuels, you cannot support that population. And so one way or the other, and this is the absurdity of their argument, one way or the other, people are going to die. If you take away all of the technology and the support that we have now, you cannot support 7.5 billion people.
No, certainly not. You can't even support a growing number of people, which fossil fuel usage makes possible. All you have to do, by the way, if you doubt what Tim here is saying, go to a third world country that has oil that is not being allowed, and you can find a couple of these in Africa. You would not believe the militant environmentalist wackos are preventing the modernization of overall societies. They are preventing the usage, the discovery, the mining, or the drilling of oil or coal to save the planet, climate change, and these societies are remaining forever in poverty. They are filthy. They live in squalor and pollution, and this is being done by militant environmentalists who are leftists who claim to care about the little guy, claim that all of this is to extend life and save. They haven't been right about anything. The population grows, and so does the discovery of food and minerals and other things necessary to support life. It continues to grow as well, where there are free markets for that to happen. But, you raise an interesting point. What is the objective of the climate change? What are they really, people, this lobby, what are they trying to do? Well, they claim they're trying to eliminate the use of fossil fuels so as to stop the inexorable greenhouse gas warming of the planet, which will kill people and make habitation impossible and so forth. The real objective of this, by the people organizing this, it is a pure anti-capitalist and anti-America political movement that is designed to impoverish the United States of America. I know you find that hard to believe, but that's the true objective of the issue. To the phones, and this is Kathy in Palm Beach Gardens, Florida. Welcome. I'm glad you called, got through. Hi.
Hi, Russ.
Hey.
I'm just thrilled to talk to you. I've been a fan for over 30 years, and you've really helped me to become a conservative, so thank you about that. thank you for what you do, because you educate us and you give us the truth. And my husband became a Republican, and he listens to you now. So thank you very, very much.
Well, I appreciate that more than you know.
Well, it's true. It really is true. And just wanted to, I don't know if it's a question or a comment, but I wonder what the Republicans can do to really turn everything around in 2020 to get us the House, to keep a strong Senate. I know we're getting rid of some of these rhinos, thank heavens, but we out here in America, we want a strong conservative in all three branches of the government. And what can we do out here? How can we make these changes? I know voting and getting active, but what else do you think we could do?
Well, first, before
I'm sorry.
No. Let me ask you in setting this up, because I've been asked this question for 30 years. I do not have a go-to answer to this, because the answer to the question is, how do we persuade a bunch of people who do not even pay much attention to any of this, of what we believe? I mean, how do we even reach them? That's number one. And if we reach them, how do we persuade them? But before, that's up for grabs how to do that. But let me ask you, do you think Trump is a conservative?
Not in the conservative. No, I don't.
But then, does Trump satisfy you ideologically?
Yes, absolutely.
Has Donald Trump ever identified himself as a conservative?
No, and that's not why I voted for him.
If it's not why you wait a minute, if it's not why you voted for him, why is it paramount that conservatism nevertheless be something that people be presented with and affirmatively support? Trump got elected without talking about it.
Right, exactly. And what I tell people was, we needed a problem solver. We had so many problems in this country, and I'm a Christian conservative.
Okay, bingo. Wait, you just answered the question. You just answered your question. I don't like having to say this, but being honest with you and with myself is paramount. And I can tell you, and you know this without me telling you, that if conservatism and liberalism are brands, the left has succeeded in destroying the brand of conservative. All you have to do is to tell a neophyte, a young person that doesn't know ideology from mousetraps, all you have to say the word conservative, and they think you're talking about a Nazi or a racist or a bigot.
Yes.
So,
I can't tell you how many times I've been called a Nazi.
Right, so pushing conservatism is not the answer. In addition, how many conservatives are never Trumpers? Do you realize that most of the conservative intellectual movement, and I mean magazines, intellectuals, I'm talking about written, in some cases spoken, but magazine writers, columnists, you realize how many of those conservatives hate Donald Trump? Right. Even while he is implementing things they have devoted their lives to, they still hate the guy.
You know, Rush, it amazes me how hateful people are towards this man. And I am a conservative, but I'm also an American first. And I see him as an American man who left everything he had to come and fight for us.
Right. But okay, let me close. Let me help here. Callers still cannot hear me on the phones here. So I have to keep talking until they catch me in a break. Here's the thing. This is the point. You just said it. You elected Trump not because he's a conservative. You elected him because he's a problem solver. So I would suggest to you, when you're out and about and you're doing, if you run into an occasion where you have the opportunity to talk politics, people that don't agree with you, do not use the word conservative. Do everything else, but don't call yourself that. Don't promote it. Don't reference it. Just talk about we need to solve problems and tell people how you would do it. Leave the label out of it. We've got a brand problem. It's time I hate it. I hate having to admit it, but there are too many mind-numbed, brain-dead robots who have a totally incorrect and blasphemous opinion of the word conservative and conservatism. That it just get rid of it. Stop calling yourself that. Just be one. Just talk to people as one. And just when you talk about things you elected Trump, solved problems. When you talk to people about issues, refer to them as problems that need to be fixed. Don't say you've got a conservative idea or a conservative philosophy. Just articulate it, but don't label it. And my point is, I think you'll have a far better chance of being persuasive if you don't use the term. And after all, what's the objective? The objective is to persuade, not to get them to call themselves conservatives. The idea is to get them to agree with you on how to solve problems like immigration. And you know what I think? I think you're going to find, if we do this, that you're going to have far more people agree with your solutions than will disagree if you don't identify yourself first as a conservative and talk. What was that?
That sounds great. That sounds great. Thank you.
Try it.
I feel like he is. And I do try not to say conservative when I'm speaking to people, but, that just reiterates to me that he is a problem solver. And I will share with you, I prayed a lot about voting for him. And God told me he would be the gatekeeper of this country. And that was one of the reasons I voted for Trump, because he's our gatekeeper.
Well, one thing is clear. There isn't anybody else back in 2016, and there may not be anybody else in 2020 who will even agree with us on what the problems are, much less approach them in a way that solves them in ways we support. Trump is, it's sad to say, one of the things I was hoping was Trump's courage and his problem solving, his success, would breed a bunch of copycats within the Republican Party. And maybe it has, and we just don't know it yet. There's some. But it has illustrated to me that a lot of people have been telling me all of my life they want to solve problems. Here they've got the chance to, and they're not signing up for it. Like the Never Trumpers. The Never Trumpers are one of the biggest batch of disappointing human beings I have encountered in my lifetime. And I think it's crucial here that Trump be encouraged and supported when he deserves it and so forth. But you talk about 2020. I think the Republican Party primaries are going to have a lot of people. Well, look at Martha McSally. Martha McSally is a great example. On paper, this is the Republican senatorial candidate in Arizona that went up against this fringe, leftist, lunatic, communist babe that doesn't even like Arizona. By the way, do you realize this babe has 2 master's degrees? This cinema babe is so overly educated, it's easy to understand why she's the crackpot that she is. Anyway, Martha McSally, from the McCain branch of the Republican Party, which number one ingredient to be in the McCain branch is hatred of Trump. She, on paper, would be one of the greatest candidates a party could nominate. Record-setting, record-breaking female Air Force fighter pilot. In terms of citizenship, you probably couldn't find a more solid citizen. Great community person, leader, and so forth. And yet, she lost in a Republican state because she made it clear she wanted nothing to do with Donald Trump. So you're going to have a bunch of Republicans running for the party nomination in 2020 who are going to come from that standpoint. Many of them are going to think, I can't outdo Trump. I can't do better. I can't be a better Trump than Trump is Trump. So it's going to be interesting to see what the Republican Party presidential field looks like, because it's going to be big. But in the meantime, that's 2 years away, and we have no idea the things that are going to happen in these 2 years that will shape the 2020 elections. But you are going to be talking to people tonight, tomorrow, holiday season. Try the idea. Be conservative. Talk about solving problems. Everybody wants to solve problems. Everybody acknowledges we have problems. When you talk about solving them, don't do it in terms of ideology, in terms of labels. Don't say, I'm a conservative, and as such what we need it. They're going to stop listening to you, the odds are. Look, I hate admitting this, but there's some things we just have to acknowledge. The media and the left have succeeded in damaging the label, the brand, if you want. And the same goes for Republican, not just conservative. So just live who you are and propose solutions according to your beliefs, but don't label them. I guarantee you, you're going to find a whole lot more people agreeing with you and say, yeah, I agree, who would not if you start off by labeling yourself. See if I'm right. Run a test. All of you. Report back. In the meantime, back after this. Look at it. Right on cue, there is CNN reporting on the Pew information and survey that I reported earlier today that immigration is declining rapidly. They don't say this, but the conclusion is, we don't need no stinking wall. CNN can't wait. They've got somebody on Tijuana showing nobody trying to cross a wall right now as evidence that Pew is right. The numbers of people attempting to get in a country is a new low, they're reporting. Don't buy it. There's other data suggests it isn't true. It's all timed to try to convince people we don't need a wall. Retail and online sales figures from this past holiday weekend have exceeded every estimate. Black Friday, Green Saturday, Cyber Monday, and in Cyber Tuesday, and hell, we're still on Cyber Monday today. You can still go certain places and find Cyber Monday deals. I mean, you roll all this up, it is a huge number of online sales figures. The economy is roaring. There are a lot of tech being sold right now as well. A lot of technological gizmos and goodies. People are buying it left and right. Smart devices of every kind for the home, plenty of laptops and PCs, tablets as well. Now, if you bought a new laptop, there will be data to transfer from your old computer to the new one. It's called migration. And that's where you're going to need our friends at iDrive, who provide you with the best online computer data backup available today. Whether you're buying a new computer or not. And sometimes you...
All right. He went into an ad at the end there, so I had to stop it. But that's pretty much the show. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Rush Limbaugh. The wondrous and wonderful. All right. So I put this together because I found it by accident. It was on my suggested viewing list. And I don't know how many of you have already seen it. I read not all of the book, but most of the book. This is Clinton Cash, the director's cut, full official movie. Bill and Hillary Clinton's blur exposed. Holy shit, that's not the word that was supposed to be there. Anyway, it's Clinton Cash. Here we go.
Hey, welcome. Stephen K. Bannon, Executive Chairman of Breitbart News. I'm also honored to be the writer and producer of the film you're about to see tonight, Clinton Cash. Now, to set the stage for this film, it's really the third in a series of investigative reports on New York Times best-selling books done by my wingman, dear friend, colleague for many, many years, Peter Schweitzer. Peter was a guy at the Hoover Institute many years ago that really focused on national security, the Cold War, but about 10 years ago really we had a talk that says, hey, I think there's a bigger problem today than foreign affairs and foreign policy, and that is this permanent political class that has kind of crept up in the United States, both Republican and Democrat, that's really not accountable or answerable to anybody. And we set up the Government Accountability Institute, a not-for-profit vehicle for you to do deep dive research. You came up with a series of books. The first book's being Throw Them All Out, the second book being Extortion, the third book in this series being Clinton Cash. The movie tonight is Clinton Cash, but I think it's very important to go back and see the genesis of this, that we're not singling out the Clintons per se in pursuing this. It's really an evolution of kind of how this whole graft and corruption has developed over time.
No, that's exactly right, Steve. You know, I lived in Washington, D.C. in the 1980s. I went to undergraduate college there, and I remember Washington as a town of, you know, above middle class bureaucrats, but it was basically a sleepy town. I came back 20 years later, having moved to Florida, and it changed. I mean, this was a town suddenly where you had lots of wealth. In fact, you and I did a special with Fox News called Boomtown, where you remember we interviewed a guy who worked at Ferrari of Washington, D.C., the Ferrari dealership there, and he actually told us that sales were great, but the problem was that Ferrari North America was unhappy with them because when people bought Ferraris in Beverly Hills or in South Beach, they financed their purchases. But in Washington, D.C., what did they do? They paid cash. They paid cash.
One of the things for the audience we should talk about is that the reason we even did Boomtown is that Washington had kind of become like Paris.
Yes.
You had great boutiques, you had all this wealth, and this was in really the depths of the 2008. It was the first couple of years of the Obama administration where you would go to, and by the way, we're not trying to blame the Obama administration. This is really a rollover from Bush also. The size of the federal government, you got into a $4 trillion budget.
Yeah.
It was like there were cranes everywhere building new buildings, and you said, this permanent political class that controls this town and controls the wealth of a $4 trillion federal budget and, quite frankly, a balance sheet today that has $19 trillion of direct obligations, but $200 trillion of off-balance sheet obligations, that there is a class of people that run this today that are unaccountable to the American people.
Yeah, you used to go to Washington, D.C. because you wanted to serve the country 100 years ago or so. Not saying that everything was perfect, but it was a lot cleaner. Now you can go to Washington, D.C. and do good and do well at the same time. And that's part of the problem. 7 of the 10 wealthiest counties in America are counties that border Washington, D.C., and they find all kinds of ways to monetize it. So we talked about, for example, and throw them all out, about insider trading on the stock market and other means of self-enrichment that the political class is exempt from.
This is important. It's insider trading. It's trading on material, non-public information that they can actually make a fortune on that's not available to you, the public. In fact, the public would actually be sentenced to long jail sentences for what happens on Capitol Hill every day.
That's exactly right. So, for example, if I know as a bureaucrat that the Medicare system is going to reimburse at a higher rate for a drug that a pharmaceutical company is offering, I could trade on that information if I'm a congressman and make a lot of money, because that's going to make the company a lot of money, Medicare, doing that. If you did that as a private citizen, you would risk going to jail, but as a government bureaucrat or as a congressman, it would be okay to do.
So in taking this analysis and really your infrastructure of investigations, we went from throw them all out, which are about congressmen enriching themselves. We then went to extortion, which was really the political class of how they raise money and extort money from businesses and citizens for their own wealth. You then came and said, hey, look, I think the Clintons, with this foundation and this Clinton Global Initiative, have really set up a paradigm that's quite unique and different than anything else we've seen before. I want to spend a couple of years, and really with a team of investigative forensic accountants, SEC lawyers, internet systems engineers, other people, that you really said, I want to do a very deep dive on this and just look at the time, really, when she was essentially Secretary of State, and look at this Clinton Foundation Global Initiative and see exactly what went on.
No, that's exactly right. So if you're looking at crony capitalism, you're looking at self-enrichment by politicians, as we did in Throw Them All Out and we did in Extortion, you have to then come to the point of saying, who's the pinnacle of this? Who does this better than anyone else? That would be Bill and Hillary Clinton. So well before that she announced she was going to be a candidate, we started researching it because they have accumulated an amazing fortune. And they've done it. They didn't start a company and take it public. They didn't create a company that created a whole bunch of jobs. They created an industry, as it were, of the Clinton Foundation and Bill getting paid to give speeches that amounts to hundreds of millions of dollars. And we wanted to do a deep dive. And here's the point that I try to make to people. Whatever you think of Bill and Hillary Clinton, here's the marker that has to be laid down. Steve, if we allow this to go on the way the Clintons have done it, there is simply no reason why 5 years from now we could not have a Secretary of Defense who says, I'm going to have my spouse hit the lecture circuit and give money to foreign governments, and I, as the Secretary of Defense, am going to set up a private charity and get the Saudis and all these foreign governments to finance it. Why can't I do it? The Clintons did it, and they got away with it. As we know in Washington, D.C., if you give a means of self-enrichment and it's legal, it's going to be imitated over and over and over again. So this is far larger than just the Clintons.
So the film you're about to see is Clinton Cash, and I want to just set the stage for this. Peter tried to answer some very basic questions in the book. The book's a couple hundred pages long. It almost has 100 pages of footnotes. It's a New York Times bestseller. When the book came out in the spring of 2015, it caused an uproar. The New York Times did major investigative pieces off it. The Washington Post did major investigative pieces off it. The book was really lionized as a type of analysis that the Clintons were going to have to start to ask questions on. It caused a firestorm. We decided to take that book, which, and to be brutally frank, was a little dry. And the reason it was dry is that Peter came to me and says, look, I don't want to get any of the facts wrong here. Almost wrote it as almost a legal briefing. We took the film and said, let's open this film up, right? Let's open the film up and show really who the people they participate with on a global basis. There's something I think that in the audience that we want people to focus on tonight. There's just two basic questions. Number one, as the Clintons say at the very beginning of the film, when they left the White House in the year 2000, they were not just had no money, not just dead broke, they actually owed many millions of dollars given the legal bills that Bill and Hillary Clinton had because of Monica Lewinsky and other investigations during the presidency. So they had kind of a negative net worth. As the Associated Press reported, not Breitbart, but the Associated Press reported in the spring of 2016, the Clintons' wealth was over $200 million. As Peter said earlier, they never took a company public. They didn't sell big real estate assets. They didn't do a leverage buyout. You know, they didn't have a big media deal. Where did that wealth come from? The Associated Press also reported that $140 million of that wealth came approximately at the time that she was Secretary of State. So the film tries to answer the question, how did that come about? In addition, as Peter was writing the book and I was seeing the roughs and the galleys and all that as we went through it, I went to Peter one time and I said, you know, what's really shocking to me as a guy that's just kind of looking over your shoulder is that everything in the book is they're really monetizing ideologically what they say they believe. And I said, if you look at this, whether it's arms trading, whether it's nuclear proliferation, whether it is human trafficking, whether it's global warming, climate change, the rainforest, in every what I call vertical, where good, decent people who I may not agree with ideologically, but who have dedicated their lives to work for these either NGOs or not-for-profits or these advocacy groups have literally spent their entire career and never made a penny. In fact, they understand they really can't make a lot of money because they're not-for-profits. If you look at those verticals, the Clintons are actually in a transaction with another guy on the other side of the trade who is the worst guy in the world who wants to exploit that opportunity where the Clinton. That is what I said. This is shocking. And as Time magazine said when they wrote a review of it before he took it to the Cannes film market, that villains in this are like a James Bond movie.
Right. Yeah, no, that's exactly right. I mean, that's one of the surprising things I think people don't realize is when they think of foreign partners with the Clintons who give to the Clinton Foundation or participate in the Clinton Global Initiative, they think it's an insurance company in London or a German media company. It's not. I mean, these are mining companies. These are forestry companies that oftentimes operate in the worst parts of the world, where there are massive human rights violations, there's mass lawlessness, there's extreme corruption. So you've got, for example, a Nigerian businessman named Gilbert Chagori, who has been charged and convicted in Europe of money laundering and aiding, abetting a criminal enterprise by European courts, absolutely, has pledged $1 billion with a B to the Clinton Foundation. Now, the Clintons say he doesn't want anything in return. Gilbert Chagori does not want anything in return for this promise. The question is, do you believe them? And when you look at the Russian entities and the entities that operate around the world, do we really believe they don't want anything in return? The answer is no, because the actions that the Clintons have taken to the benefit for these benefactors is overwhelming. They help them get oil drilling rights. They help them get the rights to knock down rainforests in Colombia. They are a donor-driven foundation that masquerades or carries a mask of charity and philanthropy around it, and it's created enormous commercial opportunities for the Clintons' funders.
As I've said many times about making this film, we really didn't make this film for what we call the traditional conservative base. I think many conservatives have their own views of the Clintons. They weighed and measured the Clintons over many, many decades. They want to relitigate the 90s sometime or other Clinton activities, whether it's Benghazi, email servers. This is not about this. This is really, we made this film for independents, for moderates, for Democrats and progressives, to actually see the Clintons, we think, for the first time through your lenses, through the lenses of people that believe in these causes and have dedicated their lives to these causes. It's quite interesting is that about the email scandal is that a big thing in the 1970s and 80s was transparency and accountability by progressive organizations like Ralph Nader, public interest research groups. One of the big tools they came up with was FOIA requests, Freedom of Information requests. As you can tell with the whole Clinton email scandal, forget the classified that's been released. There's no real release of any of the 30,000 that really deal with the Clinton cash, or deals with all of her travel overseas, everything she had to do with these people overseas as she meet them. And people should keep in mind that these are not what we call clubbable individuals. I mean, these are not CEOs of Fortune 500 companies. These are some of the worst bandits and criminals and warlords in the country that you're about to see in the film.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And you know, Time Magazine's mentioning this is like a Bond film. It really kind of is. You don't necessarily have the little fuzzy cat that they're petting, but you have people that are doing business deals with warlords in Africa. You're going to meet people that invest in sovereignty changes. I'd never heard what this meant before. Investing in sovereignty changes, saying, I'm going to give, say, $50 million to a warlord in Africa so they can seize power in a country, and in exchange, they're going to give me the oil or the diamond rights to the territory they control. These are the kinds of people who are partners, friends, and allies with the Clintons, and the Clintons are doing favors on their behalf. So it really is like a Bond film.
Two things that Peter had brought to me during the research was, one was the sovereignty changes financing, and the other was crisis financing. I said, what are these? I said, one is when there could be a potential change of government in a third world country, and they have all types of people that are involved with them in that, in the global initiative. The other is where you have a situation like Haiti, where you have these horrible natural disasters, really in third world countries, where all of a sudden all types of money and all types of relief go in, and there's a whole network of people that kind of camp out, that kind of take a vigorish off the top and make sure that money either goes to their own cronies or the money gets skimmed off the top.
That's right. They call it crisis capitalism. There's a crisis, and look, we recognize that businesses need to make money, but what you're going to find with the Clintons in Haiti, for example, is there's this massive earthquake that almost instantly kills 250,000 people, 100,000 more that are homeless, huge infrastructure problems. What do the Clintons do? They're in charge of reconstruction. The earthquake affects the southern part of the country. What do? The biggest project is in the northern part of the country that's unaffected. Why do they decide to invest rebuilding dollars in the northern part of the country, not in the southern part? Because that's what their donors want. They want this factory built so they can import duty-free goods to the United States. So you're taking, in effect, a crisis situation and monetizing it for the benefit of your donors.
Just for the release of this film, this weekend we're putting up on Amazon and in bookstores everywhere. We've actually done a graphic novel. We decided that we had so much enjoyment in making the film and the reaction the film has had. We've decided to go back and take the film. We've actually made a graphic novel. I think it makes the information in the book much more accessible. The book is also coming out of paperback next week, and so you're going to have the ability to buy the book in paperback, to go to your bookstore, or to go to Amazon and buy a graphic novel. And we took a lot of time and attention to make sure the artwork was fantastic and the story really flowed. Or you're going to get to see this film, which we're dedicated now to getting up online and getting up on digital platforms. The reason we're doing it, we've screened this a number of times, and certain times it's had, like at the Republican convention, we had about a 25% audience of progressives and Democrats, and people came to us afterwards and said, we've got to get this film out there. People have to see this information. So what I want to do without further ado, we're going to come back briefly after the film for a quick wrap-up, but without further ado, I guess featuring Gilbert Siguri, Frank Giustra, many characters you're about to meet for the first time, and believe me, I think some of them will be in your dreams or nightmares tonight. Also featuring Bill and Hillary Clinton and Peter Schweizer. Clinton Cash, next.
The world is too small, our wisdom too limited, our time here too short to waste any more of it in winning fleeting victories at other people's expense.
The Clinton Global Initiative, which brings philanthropists and CEOs together with nonprofits to make concrete commitments aimed at some of the world's toughest problems. Almost 10 years in, they have leveraged billions of dollars in assistance in more than 180 countries.
CGI was designed to tackle big global challenges in bite-sized pieces, with the conviction that regardless of size or scope, our problems will yield to concerted action and innovative partnerships of individuals, NGOs, businesses, and governments. We have to now find a way to triumph together.
All the problems that we face, from climate change to financial contagion to nuclear proliferation, are too complex and cross-cutting for any one government, or indeed for governments, to solve alone.
Because we believe that ending hunger is not only possible, but it is both a moral and strategic imperative.
Hillary Clinton is trying to shift the spotlight to global warming. The presidential contender unveiling her plans to combat climate change.
Together with innovative partners from the public and private sectors, we're working to make homes, universities, and cities more energy efficient.
We share a common future, and we are here to find common ground.
Women must be empowered.
It's classic Bill Clinton, by using his birthday to help the causes he champions, from combating climate change to obesity and even HIV/AIDS.
Help bring new dignity and respect to women and girls all over the world. And in so doing, bring new strength and stability to families as well.
We are trying to do something no one has ever done before.
A new report today claims that the Clinton Foundation gives about 10% of its money that it raises to actual charities and the services that they offer.
It has been reported you've made $5 million making speeches. The president's made more than $100 million.
Well, if you have no reason to remember, but we came out of the White House not only dead broke, but in debt.
6 years ago, Hillary Clinton was about to become Secretary of State. Barack Obama had nominated her. Everyone knew she was going to be confirmed by the Senate, going to be confirmed easily. But there was a thought, there was a question, there was a doubt out there about a potential conflict of interest.
The Clinton Foundation dropping its self-imposed ban on collecting funds from foreign governments and entities. And now the Washington Post reports total contributions to that foundation amount to $2 billion.
There's a lot of money sloshing around. Everything is blurred, and it's not good.
The questions scream out at me. What in the world happened with the foundation and these ulterior motives and this money and the email server? I'm sorry. Those scream out at me.
The amount of schmoozing involved and crossing lines and one person putting money in a foundation and then Clinton getting unbelievable amounts for his speeches, contracts going one way or another, it's not good.
I look forward to working with all of you, particularly the appropriators. We have a lot of work to do, and it is such important work that lies ahead.
We did this with a very simple strategy.
Africa is a continent that has been a chamber of horrors for decades. It's really not the fault of the African people. It's largely a result of the kind of system that's been perpetuated there. You have these oligarchs which dominate these countries that oftentimes have natural resources that can be very lucrative. And these oligarchs strike deals with foreign corporations or foreign governments who in effect prop them up and put them in power. And in exchange, these oligarchs give these entities access to rich mineral deposits. And the Clintons, you would expect to be opposed to this sort of thing, and that's at least what their language does.
Our countries have deepened our cooperation on many issues, including good governance and transparency, energy, regional security, and advancing peace and development in the Niger Delta.
The problem is, their words are different from their actions.
Rwanda has clearly taken an impressive trajectory of development, and the people here still think Kagame is the man to take them to another level. President Paul Kagame has walked all around the crowd, thanking the people for electing him unopposed as chairman of the RPF or president of the RPF for another 7-year term.
But his critics say that far from entrenching democracy in Rwanda, he's actually eroding it by silencing his opposition.
Paul Kagame has been praised by Bill Clinton and the Clinton Foundation. But the fact of the matter is Paul Kagame has a terrible human rights record. He's accused of aiding military operations in the neighboring Democratic Republic of Congo, and that actually forced the recruitment of child soldiers. The UN has identified him as being involved in activities that entailed massive human rights violations.
The newer opposition parties that have been formed in the last year or two have one by one been silenced or otherwise excluded from the race. And individuals, so not only politicians, but even journalists, for example, and other Rwandans who may have views different from those of the government, have found themselves at the receiving end of what has become quite a violent campaign of intimidation.
Well, Paul Kagame is a friend of Bill Clinton's.
I want to say a special word of appreciation for the leadership of President Kagame.
I'm greatly humbled to receive this Clinton Global Citizen Award.
He's actually given awards by Bill Clinton for his conduct as the leader of that country, and they regale him as a great military leader. This is the sort of legitimization that we don't want of these kinds of dictators and leaders. That's the kind of legitimization that the Clintons have engaged in. And they've done it in a way that creates commercial opportunities for donors and friends and allies who want to do business in Africa. Business in Africa means you're dealing with dictators who are going to give you access to, say, mineral rights or oil drilling rights, but you're going to have to pay them off. The Clintons partner with foreign entities who want access to Africa, and specifically mining companies or energy companies who need to get concessions for access to oil or natural gas or the rights to mine for gold. Those two make a powerful alliance because these companies will give money to the Clintons, either in the form of speaking fees or in the form of donations to the Clinton Foundation. And the Clintons will then, in effect, do their bidding before the halls of power and corridors of power in Africa. And they will go to foreign governments and encourage them to do business with individuals who are putting money in their pocket. And this leads to some amazing fits of behavior that, in a way, are just reminiscent of 19th century colonialism.
A perfect example of this is Ambassador Joe Wilson. Joe Wilson is a longtime friend of the Clintons. In fact, he endorsed Hillary Clinton in the 2008 presidential election, and it was also thought that he might become a senior official in Hillary Clinton's State Department. But the fact of the matter is Joe Wilson was up to something far more nefarious during Hillary Clinton's tenure as Secretary of State. In 2009, shortly after she became Secretary of State, when Wilson was the vice chairman of a company called Jarge Capital, they took out a 50-year lease on 400,000 hectares in South Sudan. South Sudan was in the middle of a civil war, and this lease was actually signed with warlords who were involved in the civil war. These individuals who were engaged in massive human rights violations, including the massacre of opponent tribes. And basically what Joe Wilson was engaged in was something called investing in sovereignty changes. They were basically cutting deals, lucrative deals, worth potentially hundreds of millions of dollars with these warlords. And the expectation was simple. These warlords would take power, then they would give them access to these lands where they could make huge amounts of money exploring for natural gas, exploring for oil, and for mineral rights. Ambassador Joe Wilson isn't the only Clinton friend and foundation donor who was working in war-torn countries. Swedish mining investor Lucas Lundin has pledged $100 million to the Clinton Foundation. He did that in 2007. And his most lucrative mining operations are in the war-torn country of the Democratic Republic of Congo. This is a country that perhaps has the most horrific human rights situation on the face of the earth. By the time Lucas Lundin made his $100 million pledge to the Clinton Foundation, his Congo operation was making, quote, staggering profits, end quote, according to his own financial statements. His overall capitalization was $20 billion. But for those profits to remain staggering, U.S. policy under Hillary Clinton had to remain unchanged. That's a problem. Hillary Clinton, as a senator back in 2006, supported something called the Congo Relief, Security, and Democracy Promotion Act. As the law's name implied, the goal was to bring reform to Congo. That's not something that Lucas Lundin would want. So in 2009, when Hillary became Secretary of State, she reversed course 180 degrees and went from supporting reform in Congo to supporting the status quo, which is exactly what Lucas Lundin would want, who of course had committed $100 million to the Clinton Foundation. But Congo isn't the only scandal-plagued country where Clinton benefactors have made millions.
Africa's most populous nation, Nigeria, is full of promise, but fulfilling that promise is sometimes a struggle. Plagued by corruption and mismanagement, the resource-rich country has a poverty rate of over 50%.
Look at a country like Nigeria, which is really a cesspool of corruption. In fact, people will say it is perhaps the most corrupt country in the world. It's rich in natural resources, it produces a lot of oil, but that money never trickles down to the people. It goes to the oligarchs who run the country, who oftentimes take that money and put it in Swiss bank accounts in a way that, of course, the people of Nigeria can never benefit from. And you see, there's a federal law in the United States which says if foreign governments that receive U.S. assistance aren't transparent in how they spend that money, that they will not be able to get U.S. foreign assistance anymore. It's about transparency. But there's a way around that law. You can get a waiver from that law. How? By getting the U.S. Secretary of State to grant you a waiver.
We intend to remain very supportive on your reform efforts. Thank you for mentioning the work we did together on the elections. We're also very supportive of the anti-corruption reform efforts, more transparency, and the work that you and your team is also championing, because we really believe that the future for Nigeria is limitless.
So in the case of Nigeria, they receive hundreds of millions of dollars in U.S. foreign assistance.
They've not made progress in being more transparent. And of course, they've gotten exemptions from Hillary Clinton while she was Secretary of State.
What's so curious about this is what was happening commercially to the Clintons while this was going on. Bill Clinton, for the first time ever, gets paid highly lucrative speeches in Nigeria, which had never happened before. In fact, he gets paid to do 2 speeches for $700,000 apiece by a businessman in Nigeria who just happens to be close with the president of that country. Keep in mind, by the way, that his normal speaking fee is less than $200,000 a speech. So this was an enormous payday for Bill Clinton.
Okay, now we'll begin the panel.
One of the pinnacles of power in that country is a gentleman named Gilbert Chagoury.
Gilbert Chagoury, who has committed $1 billion to the Clinton Global Initiative, is connected to another individual in the Clinton orbit. That would be Marc Rich, the billionaire who was on the FBI's 10 most wanted list that was suddenly and surprisingly pardoned by Bill Clinton in 2001. Marc Rich, you might recall, is somebody who was trading oil with the Ayatollah Khomeini of Iran at the same time that the Ayatollah was holding 50 Americans hostage. He also had a long history of busting UN sanctions by trading oil with the apartheid regime in South Africa and a whole host of other nefarious governments. Well, Gilbert Chagoury, the high Clinton donor, was business partners with Marc Rich. Together, they sopped up oil assets in Nigeria and sold them on the oil market for the benefit of a corrupt individual who was leading Nigeria at the time, named General Abacha.
Abacha smuggled, by some estimates, $4 to $8 billion out of the country and put them in European bank accounts. Gilbert Chagoury was indicted and convicted in Europe for helping him to do that. He was charged for aiding and abetting a criminal enterprise, and on money laundering charges. And the suffering that ends up being done here is by the people of Nigeria, who see their leadership getting a pass from the United States. The elites in those countries are getting rich, the Clintons are getting rich, and the money somehow never trickles down to the people of Nigeria.
Sadly, this theme of resources not trickling down to those most in need is a common one when it comes to the Clintons.
As we told you at the start of tonight's program, a major magnitude earthquake has hit the island of Haiti in the Caribbean. The quake measured around 7 points on the Richter scale, and its epicenter fell just 10 miles from the capital, Port-au-Prince. Haiti's ambassador to the U.S. has described the event as a catastrophe of major proportions.
So far, we have no information regarding the casualties.
The war is coming to an end!
It was a big earthquake. It lasts like 15 seconds, I think.
Probably the most devastating humanitarian crisis that Hillary Clinton faced during her tenure at the State Department was the tragic earthquake in Haiti. It happened in January of 2010, and literally in a matter of seconds, 250,000 people were estimated to have died, and a large portion of the Haitian infrastructure and economy was just decimated. It was a crisis on a massive scale.
The United States is offering our full assistance to Haiti and to others in the region. We will be providing both civilian and military disaster relief and humanitarian assistance, and our prayers are with the people who have suffered, their families, and their loved ones.
In the days and weeks that followed the earthquake in January of 2010, Hillary Clinton made visits to Haiti.
And here's the latest on Haiti. U.S. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton arrived in Port-au-Prince just about an hour ago. She is the highest-ranking U.S. official in Haiti right now since Tuesday's earthquake. She's meeting with Haitian leaders and international officials to discuss the rescue and relief efforts.
In fact, on her first visit, which occurred days after the earthquake, they literally had to stop traffic going in to the airport at Port-au-Prince. There, of course, were relief supplies that were being flown in, but that traffic was stopped so the Secretary of State could come and assess the damage.
There is a perception, and there have been complaints or reports of bottlenecks, that there's a lot of aid coming in, but it's very hard to get it out to the people who need it.
That's just not true. The aid is coming in, we're getting it out, there's just not enough of it yet.
She flew in with her political aides on a large federal airplane. She landed at the airport. She made a large press conference, made statements about her commitment to rebuilding this country, and then she was soon whisked away, headed back to Washington, D.C.
Theirs is a city in ruins, a country which can do little but wait for help to arrive.
The international community responded in the way that you would expect it to. That is, large amounts of money were committed, up to $13 billion from international relief organizations.
And of course, you had the official role of the State Department,
which would be point on U.S. taxpayer dollars going to Haiti for the purposes of relief.
I want to assure the people of Haiti that the United States is a friend, a partner, and a supporter.
Hillary Clinton's State Department would oversee the reconstruction effort, with Chief of Staff Cheryl Mills responsible for the allocation of U.S. tax dollars through USAID. And Bill Clinton, already appointed Special Envoy to Haiti for the United Nations, was named co-chair of the Interim Haiti Recovery Commission, along with a former Haitian Prime Minister.
I hope it will be rebuilt in a much stronger and more sustainable way, and I think the Haitians want that.
So this was clearly a Clinton operation from the beginning. Now, the Haitians had their own ideas about how best to rebuild their country. They wanted new roads. They wanted buildings rebuilt. And that's what you would expect. This is how you recover from an earthquake. The problem is that the Clintons had their own agenda, the interests of major donors who had a vested interest in spending that money in Haiti in ways that would benefit them.
And so you immediately had this clash between the Haitians and the Clintons. And Haitians complained almost immediately that they were shut out of the decision-making process, that it was really Bill Clinton and a few of his friends that were calling the shots in the IHRC. And they made some monumentally bad decisions that not only didn't benefit the Haitian people, but ended up putting money in the pockets of major Clinton donors who had economic stakes in Haiti.
We have been united behind a single goal: making investments in this country's people and your infrastructure.
So it's a classic example of what some people call disaster capitalism. Disaster capitalism in that a natural disaster creates opportunities for rebuilding to take place, but also for self-enrichment to take place. And if you look at the Clintons and the promises that were made and the results that actually followed, it is a tragic story of crony capitalism gone awry.
The single largest relief project that the United States committed taxpayer dollars to, $124 million to be exact, was a project called Caracol, a textile factory that was built in the northern part of the country that was supposed to create some 60,000 jobs and was supposed to create tremendous economic growth.
There's a problem here already. You see, the earthquake affected the southern part of Haiti. The northern part of the country was entirely unaffected.
But who were the beneficiaries of this? Companies like Gap, Target, and Walmart, to name a few. The Caracol factory was built, but it didn't create 60,000 jobs. It created barely 5,000 jobs. But the major American companies who got textiles tariff-free, made at low wages, benefited enormously.
And the end effect on the Haitians was very, very minimal. If you look at some of the infrastructure projects that were undertaken, the Clintons had very grand plans to build large tracts of homes, and there were contractors that were selected for those projects. Sometimes the contractors had experience, sometimes they did not.
There's one company in Florida that spent $1 million getting equipment into Haiti. They had experience in disaster relief, but according to the owners of that company, they only made a small donation to the Clinton Foundation. And guess what? They didn't get any relief contracts. On the other hand, the contractors who did win the awards were given the opportunity to build homes, and in some instances were supposed to build tens of thousands of homes for Haitians. They ended up building a fraction of that. For instance, the New Settlements program was supposed to build 15,000 homes for $53 million. Instead, it built 2,600 homes, less than a quarter of the original estimate, for $90 million, or $47 million over budget.
And they got away with it.
So you had contracts going to these relief organizations that were also involved with the Clinton Global Initiative. And you had this one organization, Dahlberg, that was supposed to do an assessment for relocating people that suffered from the earthquake. They determined that people should be moved to a site that happened to be on a cliff that was highly unstable. USAID's Inspector General reviewed Dahlberg's recommendations and found them basically unusable. One member of the USAID shelter team was quoted by Rolling Stone magazine as saying that the recommendations were so bad, it looked like the team never even got out of their SUVs. Another person said that only one of the people that was sent to Haiti by Dahlberg actually spoke French.
Telecom mogul Dennis O'Brien is one of the world's richest people, and he's finding opportunities in the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. The Irish billionaire is the largest private investor in Haiti through his company Digicel, and he's now leading the Clinton Global Initiative efforts down in Haiti.
Probably no one came out better in the Haitian reconstruction effort than an Irish billionaire named Dennis O'Brien. He is a Clinton Foundation donor, giving them between $5 and $10 million. He helped arrange speeches for Bill Clinton, too.
The interest of the Obama administration, particularly the former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, you know, all the different things that have happened to help Haiti get up off the floor have been led by the U.S.
And he was the owner of something called Digicel, which is a cell phone company at the time of the earthquake. As part of that relief effort, the State Department run by Hillary Clinton wanted to fund a mobile money transfer service that would allow Haitian citizens to transfer and receive money on their phones. Well, Digicel applied to be the recipient of that grant money. 4 weeks after their application, Digicel actually sponsored a speech for Bill Clinton in Jamaica, and they paid him $225,000. And as it turns out, within 4 months of that speech, Digicel would receive the first installment of that grant money. The earthquake actually has been great for Digicel and Dennis O'Brien.
More than 4 years since a magnitude 7.0 earthquake devastated Haiti, and outrage there is growing over the largely failed reconstruction effort, despite the hundreds of millions of dollars in aid that has been collected and spent by the IHRC, the Interim Haiti Recovery Commission.
So whether you're talking about housing or cell phones, you see that the people that are closest to the Clintons have made out very well from the Haitian earthquake. The rest of the country, the ordinary people of Haiti, not so much.
Haitian activists staged a protest outside Hillary Clinton's Manhattan office. The demonstrators claim billions of dollars were stolen through the Haiti Reconstruction Commission headed by Bill Clinton. They also say Haiti was used as a cover for foreign governments to funnel kickbacks of possibly hundreds of millions of dollars through the Clinton Foundation. They say it was done in exchange for favors that Hillary was doing for them as Secretary of State.
The tragedy is we had an opportunity to rebuild in a way that would give the people of that country hope. Sadly, that opportunity was squandered, and what took place, rather than rebuilding Haiti, was the self-enrichment by friends of the Clintons. For all of Bill Clinton's talk about building Haiti back better, the fact remains that the most visible evidence of Clinton's role in the recovery isn't the improvement of daily life for everyday Haitians, but the construction of new luxury hotels just miles from the folks who have been living in tarps USAID handed out immediately after the earthquake.
We are telling the world of the crimes that Bill and Hillary Clinton are responsible for in Haiti.
But while the world eventually lost interest in Haiti's recovery, the influence and connections afforded to donors from the Clinton Foundation appear to have been lessons learned by others. So how much do connections to the Clintons matter when you're talking about Haiti? Consider the case of gold mining. The government of Haiti had not granted a gold mining concession in 50 years. They decided to do so during the reconstruction of their country, which was being overseen by Bill and Hillary Clinton. What company did they select to get this gold mining permit? A company called VCS Mining. VCS Mining had very little experience in gold mining, but what did they have? They had connections. Shortly after they got that concession, someone joined their board of directors. It just happened to be Tony Rodham, brother of Hillary Rodham Clinton. It was a true disaster that followed the earthquake, which was the natural disaster. This was the man-made Clinton-caused disaster in relief that led to the wasting of enormous sums of money, the enrichment of elites that were friends with the Clintons, and the Haitians were left in a situation where their life was really not much better than it was the day after the earthquake happened.
An ambitious pipeline is firing off a war of opinions.
Environmental activists marched in Washington today to protest plans for the Keystone XL oil pipeline.
A $7 billion project to transport 800,000 barrels of tar sands oil a day from Canada down to the Gulf Coast.
In Washington, a showdown on the Senate floor today over the Keystone XL pipeline. The vote to approve the controversial pipe project has big political implications.
The pipeline would create 20,000 jobs, but opponents say the environmental risk is too great.
One of the touchstones of the climate change debate has been the Keystone XL pipeline. It's designed to carry oil from Canada through the United States to refineries in Louisiana and in Texas. The environmental movement has wholeheartedly rejected this deal from the beginning because they believe that it's going to further contribute to the problems of climate change.
Pipeline.
1.
We are the people.
2.
You can't ignore us.
3.
Now, you would think that the Clintons would be opposed to the Keystone XL pipeline deal because of those concerns. And perhaps they might be, except for one or two problems, or should I say 1 or 2 million problems.
You see, when Hillary Clinton became Secretary of State in late 2008, there was already an issue related to the Keystone XL pipeline sitting on her desk. She was going to have to sign an environmental and economic impact statement and decide whether the Keystone XL pipeline should go forward. At that precise time, Bill Clinton gets a lucrative offer of nearly $2 million to give 10 speeches in Canada for the first time ever from a company called TD Bank Investment Group. He gave the last speech in May of 2011. 3 months later, Hillary's State Department releases an environmental impact statement that was seen as largely supportive of the Keystone XL pipeline in a way that was massively controversial. Hillary Clinton, in effect, was betraying the environmental movement by greenlighting this deal, when she had in her hands the power to kill this deal in its crib. It was shocking. Organizations like Greenpeace and Friends of the Earth were stunned. They wanted investigations, but everybody was mystified. Nobody could understand why Hillary Clinton would sign off on this deal, particularly when she had been in favor of dealing with climate change, and her boss, Barack Obama, by all indications, seemed to be opposed to this deal as well.
It's also a time for a new approach to climate change. We know we've got to deal with global warming. We're seeing the effects of it. We need to invest in clean energy technology today so that we can create new high-paying jobs to protect our environment, to grow our economy, and to finally break our addiction to foreign oil.
How did we go from the Clintons being in favor of fighting climate change and dealing with fossil fuel dependence to Hillary Clinton signing off on the Keystone XL pipeline? The evidence that we found was that it was about the money. This was not a philosophical change. This was not a new way of thinking about global warming. This was a way of taking $2 million in cash to essentially buy a decision by the Secretary of State. Why is the TD Bank Investment Group so interesting? Because they just happen to be one of the largest shareholders in the Keystone XL pipeline itself. When we looked at Bill Clinton's pattern of giving speeches, we looked at who was paying him, when they were paying him, and if they have ever paid for a speech before. What's so stunning is that TD Bank had never sponsored a speech by Bill Clinton before. And then suddenly, in late 2008, when Hillary Clinton has been announced to be the Secretary of State, and when sitting on her desk is the matter of the Keystone XL pipeline, they suddenly decide to sponsor these speeches. And when people realized that the Clintons had pocketed about $2 million at the precise time Hillary Clinton was making this decision, it all now suddenly made sense. Because as we've seen repeated over and over and over again, when it comes to the Clintons, you have to follow the money. And in the case of the Keystone XL pipeline, they seem to have abandoned their principles, their commitment, as it was, to combating global warming and dealing with our dependence on fossil fuels. They jettisoned that when $2 million showed up and suddenly came out in favor of the Keystone XL pipeline. When you see this sort of pattern of behavior, you can't come to any other conclusion that it's a system of pay to play. And again, other entities appear to have picked up on this business model too. Well, Bill Clinton has been paid enormous sums of money over the years to give speeches. On average, he gets a little less than $200,000 per speech. But something happened in late 2008. His speaking fees skyrocketed after he'd been out of office for years. The reason was his wife had become Secretary of State. In fact, 11 of the 13 speeches for which Bill Clinton has been paid $500,000 or more occurred precisely when Hillary was the most powerful diplomat in the world.
You will never contribute to an organization that will give you a higher probability of having your good intentions turn into real positive changes in other people's lives. That will give you a better chance than what you've done here tonight.
His single biggest speech payday came from the Swedish telecom company Ericsson. And it's a very, very unusual and troubling story. Now, Ericsson is a Swedish telecom company that in 2009 and 2010 was in trouble with Hillary Clinton's State Department because Ericsson was selling a lot of telecom equipment to Iran, to Belarus, and to other oppressive governments, about which the State Department was concerned. Ericsson risked being put on a list by the federal government in the United States for trading with an enemy state. There was actually an effort being put forward in Washington to broaden Iranian sanctions,
to include the very technologies that Ericsson was selling to the Iranian government. So it's against this background that Ericsson decided now might be a good time to hire Bill Clinton to give a speech. They had never paid for a speech by him before, and they decided to go in big, $750,000 for a single speech. 7 days after he gave that speech, Hillary's State Department came out with a statement which said, "We are not going to broaden sanctions on Iran to include technologies like telecom. We're going to rely and expect companies like Ericsson to police themselves." It was a massive win for Ericsson. Ericsson was able to avoid having to deal with a regulatory battle in Washington, giving up contracts that were highly lucrative in these countries, and being put on a list that would create an enormous diplomatic problem for them, all because essentially they paid Bill Clinton to give a speech for $750,000.
Will you continue to give speeches?
Oh, yeah. I got to pay our bills.
So the question is, why do we see the Clintons reversing decades of policy positions that they've held so closely on issues like human rights and environment? And a big clue comes from the folks that are giving the Clinton Foundation literally tens of millions of dollars. And one, if not the biggest donor to the foundation, is a Canadian named Frank Giustra. Giustra is in the mining business, hardly something you'd call environmentally friendly. And he has interests all over the world. And he used his relationship with the Clintons to benefit those interests, regardless of the environmental concerns. A great example of this is what happened in Colombia.
What's so interesting about the relationship that the Clintons have with Frank Giustra is they tend to show up in these foreign countries together at the same time.
Frank Giustra's made billions of dollars over the years in the so-called penny stock market in Canada, which is highly open to manipulation. He's been very successful in this area. Now, the Vancouver Stock Exchange is not like the New York Stock Exchange in the United States. This is the stock market or an exchange that is dominated by penny stocks, made up of a lot of natural resources stocks. It's sort of the wild, wild west of investing.
It's called Dodge City sometimes. And the reason is because there's a lot of speculators, there's a lot of misinformation that's put around, and there are a lot of mining companies that don't really have any assets, but will proclaim to have gotten the rights to some lucrative gold mine, let's say, and then they send that news out to the public in the hope that it will lead to a flood of people buying the penny stock so the shareholders can sell their assets. So in June of 2010, Bill Clinton and Frank Giustra fly to Bogota, Colombia. And who arrives there at roughly the same time? Secretary of State Hillary Clinton.
The big thing from the news conference was where Bill and Hillary were dining the other night in Bogota. I had a chance to talk to about her dinner experience in the Zona Rosa, and here's what she had to say. Dinner was good?
It was excellent in every way.
So it was like eating in the States, but eating in Bogota.
Well, it was a real treat to be in Bogota and to be with people who love this city so much, including my husband.
Now, in her memoirs, Hillary Clinton says that this is just a happy coincidence. But when you see what follows, you realize that this is no coincidence.
The following morning, Bill Clinton has a breakfast meeting with the outgoing president of Colombia, President Uribe. Then, like a tag team, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton has a noon lunch meeting with him, and she grants him several favors, including technical agreements that the Colombian government wants. In the days that follow, something dramatic happens. Frank Giustra has 3 companies that get major concessions from the Colombian government: Pacific Rubiales, Petroamerica, and Prima Colombia Properties. One of those, Prima Colombia Properties, gets a concession to cut timber in a rainforest in Colombia along the Pacific coast.
And that timber is not intended to export to the United States, but is intended for export to China. There's an outrage and upset environmentalists who realize what's going on, and eventually that permit is yanked by a future president of Colombia, but not before Frank Giustra's company is able to profit from cutting down these rainforests, which again is a behavior that runs so contrary to what the Clintons profess to be in favor of.
We all know that in order to build low-carbon economies of the future, we need sustainable forests.
I also know the future of our planet depends on healthy, standing forests.
They have talked about the problems of deforestation. They've talked about the problems of the need for successful growing forests to mitigate carbon dioxide in the air. And yet, when this commercial opportunity was presented to a major donor of theirs, they seemed to be very much supportive of that and, in fact, helped to get him those concessions.
He deserves the credit for this. This was his idea, not mine, and he raised the money. And it's an astonishing achievement. My job is to make sure that it's not in vain, that he gets the return on his investment and his compassion and his commitment.
The Clintons appear to have changed their stance on issues even more significant than the environment in ways that benefit those who have put money in their pockets.
I represent a president and a country committed to a vision of a world without nuclear weapons and to taking the concrete steps necessary that will help us get there.
The Indian nuclear deal, I think, is so troubling because this is a core national security issue.
One of the signature achievements in foreign policy for Bill Clinton was pushing the Test Ban Treaty and the Non-Proliferation Treaty.
Today in New York, the United Nations General Assembly voted overwhelmingly to adopt the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty and open it for signature later this month.
The NPT has been sort of the holy grail when it comes to nuclear disarmament, something that the Clintons have been supportive of, not just for years, but for decades.
That was all thrown asunder in 1998 when the Indian government tested
nuclear weapons underground.
India's action threatens the stability of Asia and challenges the firm international consensus to stop all nuclear testing.
These were tests that truly shocked the world. Even the CIA was not aware that these tests were about to take place. Clinton's reaction was volcanic. He felt betrayed by the Indian government. And as a result, he imposed sanctions on India, essentially saying, you're not going to get access to U.S. nuclear technology until you sign the NPT, the Non-Proliferation Treaty. In 2005, the Indian government wanted to get these sanctions lifted.
Not only do they have an interest in expanding their civilian nuclear base, they live in a neighborhood where some pretty tough customers and rivals have nuclear weapons themselves. First of all, you've got Pakistan, which is right next door, which is widely believed to have nuclear weapons. And then you have China, a longtime rival of India, which has a nuclear arsenal.
The Clintons said that they were in favor of giving the Indian government some access, but the problem is it didn't go nearly as far as the Indian government wanted. So in 2005, they started making donations to the Clinton Foundation.
This morning, yet another shady donation to the Clinton Foundation has surfaced, this time tied to a donor from India, apparently a friend of Bill Clinton.
We're talking about tens of millions of dollars from Indian interests flowing into the Clinton Foundation. And we're talking about at least hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars in speeches that Bill Clinton was paid by interested parties in the Indian nuclear deal. Amar Singh, according to Clinton disclosures, has given between $1 and $5 million to the Clinton Foundation in the push to get them to support Indian access to nuclear technology.
He's a member of parliament who has gotten in fistfights on the floor of the parliament, who's been charged with bribing members of parliament to get certain pieces of legislation passed. You see, the problem is when you ask Amar Singh, he says it wasn't my money. I don't have that kind of money. I couldn't have given him that amount of money. And in fact, when you look at Indian public records, you see that Amar Singh doesn't have a net worth anything close to being able to give that amount of money. So where did the money come from?
Well, sometimes the most obvious answer is the correct one. Sant Chantwal is an Indian businessman who has been close to the Clintons for years. He pledged to raise $5 million for her 2008 presidential campaign. And Bill Clinton was at his son's wedding. They actually named him as a trustee of the Clinton Foundation. When Hillary Clinton was first running for the Senate in 2000, Sant Chatwal was in trouble with a federal agency called the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. He basically owed them millions of dollars from unpaid loans. Well, in 2000, Chatwal throws a fundraiser for Hillary Clinton, and he brings in $500,000. A few months later, with Bill Clinton still president of the United States, Sant Chatwal's case with the FDIC was abruptly settled for a mere $125,000. So basically, the federal government got pennies on the dollar. He would actually go on to plead guilty for funneling $180,000 in illegal campaign contributions to Hillary Clinton, among others. And no one seems to have made the connection. Well, maybe one reason no one made the connection is because the Clinton Foundation mysteriously erased any mention of Sant Chatwal from the website once he had admitted to his illegal activity. So here we are years later, and we've got this donation in a guy's name who swears he didn't actually make the donation. And you've got this longtime Clinton benefactor who actually gets the highest civilian award in India because of his role in changing Hillary Clinton's mind on this nuke deal.
Tan Singh Chatwal says he's worked with everybody and even laid the foundation of the Indo-US nuclear deal.
So the Indian government says that they've given you this award for your role in pushing the Indo-US nuclear deal forward. How exactly would you describe the role you played in this?
Well, I can tell you Indian nuclear power deal. If you look at it, I'm the first one. I laid the foundation.
On the eve of the vote in 2008 to approve Indian access to U.S. civilian nuclear technology, Amar Singh, who barely knows Hillary Clinton, had a 2-hour meeting with her where they discussed the Indian nuclear deal. Amar Singh says that the dinner meeting resulted in her telling him that she was supportive of the deal and that she was making efforts to make sure that the deal did get through.
And lo and behold, by 2008, Hillary Clinton was fully in support and in favor of this policy in a way that was a complete reversal of the position that she had taken before.
In other words, the flow of money had led the Clintons to change their positions on the Non-Proliferation Treaty, and specifically, India getting access to U.S. nuclear technology.
This was a decision that was wholly out of step, wholly inconsistent with a progressive liberal agenda. Hillary Clinton made a decision of reversing her previous position after the flow of funds to the Clinton Foundation, and her husband gave some speeches in India.
But this wouldn't be the last time Hillary reversed herself regarding nuclear weapons technology. Shockingly, Bill and Hillary would end up receiving money from folks that were looking to make something happen a lot closer to home. I think the Russian uranium story is perhaps the most shocking and most blatant example of how the Clintons operate. This is a story about the Russian State Nuclear Agency, American uranium, $145 million in cash, and the Clintons.
At the end of the day, this is a story about buying influence and selling influence. The Clintons are the sellers of influence, the Canadian investors and the Russians are the buyers. Bill Clinton had gone to the Central Asian country of Kazakhstan in 2005 with Frank Giustra.
Kazakhstan is a country that's been run since the collapse of the Soviet Union by a dictator named Nazarbayev, who shuts down political opposition and tortures political opponents.
The ostensible purpose of the visit to Kazakhstan by Bill Clinton was to talk with Nazarbayev about AIDS, HIV. The problem is Kazakhstan really does not have an AIDS, HIV problem. So that explanation really doesn't make sense. What makes far more sense is that Frank Giustra wanted access to very lucrative Kazakh uranium mines.
Kazakhstan is one of the largest producers of uranium in the world. Bill Clinton arrives there with Frank Giustra, and they have a series of meetings with Kazakh officials. There's a press conference where Bill Clinton stands with the dictator of Kazakhstan and he praises the human rights record. He praises that elections are being held in the country, and he even says that Kazakhstan should head up something called the OSCE, which is the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. Think about that for a second. Bill Clinton is saying that a known human rights violator who's been condemned by human rights organizations around the world should head up a human rights organization. They go from a press conference to a dinner where Frank Giustra, Nazarbayev, the dictator of Kazakhstan, and Bill Clinton meet and talk.
Well, 2 days after that meeting, Frank Giustra finally gets his uranium concessions,
worth hundreds of millions of dollars. A couple of weeks after that, Bill Clinton gets his $30 million from Frank Giustra, the first payment in what will become more than $100 million in pledges and commitments and donations made by Frank Giustra.
So it's really, in a way, a simple story in that they all are walking away from the table with something that they want. Nazarbayev is getting the legitimacy of an ex-president, saying what a nice and kind leader he is. Frank Giustra gets his uranium concession, and Bill Clinton and his foundation get cold, hard cash.
Now let's move to chapter 2 of this story, which is even more sinister. You see, the international uranium market is very competitive. The Kremlin sees dominance and control of the uranium market as a source of national power. Frank Giustra takes that uranium concession he got in Kazakhstan and puts it into a company in a so-called reverse merger, which was one way for a private company to go public to form something called Uranium One. It's a company traded on the stock market in Canada, and they start acquiring uranium concessions in places like Wyoming, Texas, New Mexico, and Utah. And by 2009, they have what is expected to be 50% of future uranium production in the United States. This gets the interest of Vladimir Putin and the Russian government. And in fact, there are State Department cables that were leaked through WikiLeaks, which show that Hillary was aware of the fact that the Russians took great care to try to dominate the international uranium market.
Well, the Russians want to buy this asset, and they offer a 40% overprice on the share of the stock. And for this transaction to go through, it has to be approved by the U.S. federal government. Why? Because uranium is regarded as a critical industry in the United States.
After all, this is used for our civilian nuclear reactors and goes into nuclear weapons. So it goes before the federal government, where it needs to be signed off by a series of federal agencies, including the Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton. As Hillary Clinton is contemplating this, shareholders in Uranium One, including Frank Giustra, have sent more than $145 million to the Clinton Foundation. The chairman of that company at the precise time is a guy named Ian Telfer, who is also making donations to the Clinton Foundation, as is Frank Holmes, who is another major Uranium One shareholder.
And Hillary Clinton, who has a record of opposing precisely these kinds of deals, comes out and says, you know what, I think this is a good deal. Let's let Vladimir Putin take control of what is now 20% of U.S. uranium production. Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton are the only figures in American politics who are willing to do this deal and who could actually pull it off, because they had a reputation that runs so contrary to what they're doing. I mean, this is what the Clinton Foundation does, right? This is what they talk about politically, their support for human rights, their concerns about proliferation, their concerns about issues related to Russian aggression.
There's no doubt that when Putin came back in and said he was going to be president, that did change the relationship. We have to stand up to his bullying. And
what's so interesting when you consider this uranium deal are the actions of a small Canadian investment firm called Salida Capital. Salida Capital, in 2010, as this deal was going down, committed to give millions of dollars to the Clinton Foundation, and they also sponsored a speech by Bill Clinton in Canada. Salida Capital is also the name of a wholly owned subsidiary of Rosatom. Who is Rosatom? Well, this is the government agency in Russia that controls their nuclear arsenal, that built nuclear reactors in Iran, and engages in nuclear technology exchanges with rogue countries like North Korea. What this means, in essence, is that the Russian government, specifically Rosatom, was funneling money through a subsidiary directly to the Clinton Foundation. But the payday didn't end there. 4 months before Hillary Clinton's State Department would sign off on the Russian purchase of Uranium One, Bill Clinton got paid $500,000 to give a single speech in Moscow. He was being paid by a firm called Renaissance Capital, which has a long history of association with Russian intelligence services. What makes this speech stand out is not only the timing of when he's being paid, but the amount that he's being paid. You see, the last time Bill Clinton gave a speech in Russia was 5 years earlier. At that time, he was paid about 1/3 of what he was being paid this time.
Why is Russian control of 20% of U.S. uranium so troubling?
If you're in an era where nuclear weapons are a reality, where nuclear energy is an important component of energy production in the United States, and increasingly around the world, control of uranium is absolutely crucial. And unlike oil or natural gas can be found in so many places around the world, there are precious few places where you can find significant and large amounts of uranium that you can produce on a commercial scale. What we've essentially done is handed this precious resource to Vladimir Putin and the Russian government. They're not only engaged in aggression in places like Ukraine, but they've been very aggressive in fighting American interests around the globe. Russia's not an ally. Russia's not a friend. Vladimir Putin's Russia is a rival of the United States, and yet we've given them control over this precious resource.
Uranium, the key mineral in nuclear generation, is a domestic resource.
This is what's going to power America.
I think a lot of people in Middle America would be surprised to know that the Russian government is doing business in places like Colorado or Wyoming or Utah. These are small mining towns. These are operations that have existed for a while, that have been under the control of American companies or for a while Canadian companies. But it's now Russian companies that control this, and those companies are controlled by the Russian government. Having read through the archives of the KGB, the files that they have been released, I can tell you that they look at the United States as weak and ineffectual. This is a thuggish government that is engaged in massive human rights violations. There are opponents of this regime that have been killed or have disappeared. There's been persecution of human rights organizations. There's been persecution of homosexuals. And it's shocking and stunning to me that there has not been more attention focused to this fact, that we have given this critical resource to somebody who is engaged in so much nefarious behavior.
Greetings from Washington. I want to thank all of you for your work to root out corruption that weakens economic development, feeds black markets and organized crime, and undermines the promise of democracy. As we work together to eradicate corruption in our own countries, we should also maintain the highest standards of transparency and accountability in our development efforts around the world. Corruption in emerging markets and fragile democracies undermines the confidence of citizens and investors alike, while responsible governance helps to foster sustainable economic development and political stability.
I believe in the oldest adage in American politics, which is follow the money. Enormous amounts of money have flowed to the Clintons from foreign governments, foreign financiers, and businesses. Some of that money lands in their pocket. Some of it lands in their foundation. It's a pattern we've seen repeated over and over and over again all around the world. It's not a coincidence. Money exchanges hands and favors are done. Now Clinton friends and supporters will say there's no smoking gun. But look at American political history. People are convicted all the time for a pattern of behavior where, for example, they're engaged in insider trading on the stock market.
So, for example, you have a foreign corporation or a foreign government that wants something from the State Department while Hillary Clinton is Secretary of State. They will make a large payment to the Clinton Foundation. That will be followed by favorable action on their behalf. If that happens one or two times, you might say, look, it's just a coincidence. But when you see the pattern recreated over and over and over again, you have to recognize that these events are connected. They've created a model for massive self-enrichment that allows you to go into so-called public service, but get extremely rich at the same time. And when friends and allies say that the Clintons aren't really that interested in money, their actions show otherwise. What's so shocking to a lot of people is that making of that money requires them to betray their progressive values, the environment, labor unions, women's rights, human rights. The Clintons are doing business and growing rich with the favor of the very individuals who you would expect to be their political opposites. For a very long time in American history, and probably still to this day, one of the worst things that could be said about you as a politician is that you are on the take from foreign interests. What the Clintons have essentially done is busted down the door and robbed the bank of that concept. So when people think of the Clintons taking foreign money, they think it's maybe an insurance company from Great Britain, or they think it's from a supermarket chain in Canada. The fact of the matter is a lot of that money comes from the darkest, worst corners of the world. Are countries like Nigeria and Russia in the habit of giving money to politicians and not wanting something back? The Clintons are glad to take this money. It's made them fabulously wealthy. But what has it done for us? Before we had to worry about money from Wall Street and big labor, now we have to worry about it coming from around the world and infecting our politics and damaging our politics, everything from our uranium policy to our human rights policy. Nothing seems to be safe anymore. How is this not corruption? How is this not a crime? With the Clintons, nothing is sacred. Everything is for sale. But we are the ones who are paying the price. Maybe, just maybe, the American people are tired of being sold out.
All right, man. How about that shit? Silly humans. She's all dizzy and shit. All right, guys. It is once again that time. So I will just tell you, have a good night. May you and yours all be blessed. May your socks be on your feet and your gloves on your hands. In the attic. Don't go in the attic. My way back, gotta find my swampy home. Gotta find my way back, back to the swamp where I belong. Been gone such a long time. Mama, I'm coming home. Been gone such a long time. Mama, I'm coming home. Gotta find my way back. Gotta find my Louisiana home. Gotta find my way back, way down south where I belong. Been 10 years in prison. Mama, I'm coming home. Where the bodies in the swamp are hidden. Mama, I'm coming home. No, I took the money. I took the money and I hid it good. No, I took the money, buried it deep out in them woods. 10 years in prison. Mama, I'm coming home. Where the bodies in the swamp are hidden. Mama, I'm coming home. Gotta find my way back. Gotta find my swampy home. Gotta find my way back deep in the swamp where I belong. Man, gone such a long time. Mama, I'm coming home. Been gone such a long time. Mama, I'm coming home. Oh yeah. Get that crawfish pie ready, Mama. And that gilly gumbo. You don't know what I've been eating. Good night.